As of 2009, the superhero game was a known quantity, a straightforward fantasy of power. But what happens when the very place you are meant to restore order to is an active participant in the chaos? You are asked to contain madness when the walls themselves have already gone insane. This is not just a story about Batman, it is a study of how atmosphere becomes a weapon, how an institution's cruelty is codified into its very architecture. The game traps you on an island designed to feel uncomfortably real, a place where every rusted cage and flickering light tells a story of punishment, not rehabilitation. This is not just a prison break, it is an examination of how a system's manufactured despair becomes a force of nature. Your world collapses to Arkham Island, a sprawling Gothic nightmare where every hallway demands a verdict. The official broadcasts from Warden Quincy Sharp deliver a story of control and order, a narrative that feels authoritative and safe. Yet the Joker's voice crackles over the asylum's intercom, a constant whisper of a darker, truer reality where he is the one in charge. You distrust the institution, but you follow its procedures because survival seems to demand your complicity. The first phase of the night introduces a simple mandate: return the Joker to his cell. This act of control costs you nothing but your own sense of security as you escort the architect of your own entrapment deeper into the maze. You watch him break free and you realize the rules you were following were never meant to contain him. They were meant to contain you. The second phase weaponizes information. The public address system, once a source of institutional calm, is now Joker's personal broadcast, a channel he uses to inform his armed henchmen of your every move. Checking your surroundings is no longer a choice but a constant, draining labor. The rule is not about safety. It is a ritual designed to make you feel hunted inside the one place you are supposed to command. A doctor arrives, a woman named Penelope Young, forcing you to choose between the risk of trusting a stranger and the risk of leaving a potential victim to the island's horrors. She is a piece of the system, a creator of the very poison now coursing through Arkham's veins. In saving her, you learn a devastating truth: the line between healer and monster is not a wall, but a choice she already made. Then, the paperwork of the past appears not as forms, but as the chronicles of Amadeus Arkham. Deciphering them is a procedural act that sanitizes the asylum's origin story into a collectible. You are no longer just a vigilante, you are an archivist of madness, piecing together a history that explains how a man's grief could curdle into the foundation of a torture house. You spend precious energy looking inward, not at your own morality but through the psychedelic lens of the Scarecrow's fear toxin. The tables are turned, the hunter becomes the prey, stalked by a monstrous projection of your deepest anxieties. You are executioner and suspect, judge and evidence, trapped not by the asylum's walls but by the prison of your own mind. For a moment, the arrival of Bane suggests a familiar order has returned, a brute to be outsmarted, a physical problem with a physical solution. Then the facade burns away as the Titan formula spreads, and what you feared most, a Joker with the strength to match his madness, walks the halls with impunity. The monster you were meant to stop is now the monster everyone can become. You can seal the doors and purge the island, unsure if you saved anyone or only delayed the inevitable. The Joker's laughter echoes in the silence, a testament to the fact that even if you win, the island has still remade you in its image. If you fall, you become just another one of his punchlines. And if you cross too many lines to win, the world outside these walls will only see the monster that walked out. The system does not reveal monsters, it manufactures them by demanding you sort the mad from the sane in a place that has forgotten the difference. In a world that insists you must descend into its madness to restore order, is survival worth the price of becoming the thing you hunt? As of 2007, the rules for a superhero game were simple. They were power fantasies, clean and direct. But what happens when the fantasy curdles into a nightmare, when the asylum housing the monsters is a monster itself? You are not asked to save the city, you are asked to survive the island. This is not a review. It is a descent into how an environment becomes a character and how a fight for control becomes a mirror for the madness held within its walls. Batman: Arkham Asylum is not just a game about a hero, it is a study of how architecture becomes a cage for the mind and how a simple combat system becomes a ritual of punishment. Your world collapses to the corridors of Arkham Island, a place divided into medical wards and decaying gardens where every intercom chime delivers a verdict. The Joker's broadcasts deliver the new laws of this place, his voice a constant, taunting authority. Yet the island itself whispers a darker truth through its rusted cages, its cracked floors, its chairs built for restraint, not healing. You distrust the clown prince of crime, yet you move through his maze because survival requires you to play by his rules. Phase 1 begins with a lie, the illusion of control. The Joker is restrained, the guards are confident, and the island is merely a holding cell. But then the trap is sprung and the hallways you just walked are trashed, the walls graffitied with the new order of chaos. The rules are not a safeguard, they are a story about who is truly in charge. Then the island itself begins to fight back. First, you notice the exteriors are safer than the interiors, a place to breathe. Hours later, the roles reverse as snipers replace armed guards and crazed inmates roam the dirt paths. The tight, low-lit shadows of the buildings become your only solace, turning scrutiny of your environment into the price of survival. An agent of the state, Commissioner Gordon, arrives as a symbol of order, forcing you to choose between protecting an ally and pursuing the source of the chaos. His capture is not just a plot point, it is a mechanical test of your priorities, revealing that in Arkham, compassion is a liability. It is the first sign that the system you serve cannot protect anyone here, not even its own. Then the paperwork arrives, but it is written on the walls. The Chronicles of Arkham, deciphered one by one, sanitize the island's history of violence into a bureaucratic procedure of madness. You are no longer just a vigilante, you are an archaeologist of suffering, piecing together a story that implicates the institution itself. You are allocating blame within a spreadsheet of ghosts. You spend precious energy to look deeper into the asylum's history, only to discover that its founder, Amadeus Arkham, showed the same signs of madness as the inmates he treated. You are judge and jury in a place built by a man who became a prisoner of his own design, trapped by a system that feeds on your fear of becoming what you hunt. For a moment, the island's supernatural qualities feel contained, limited to the psychological nightmare Scarecrow conjures. These sequences weaponize your own perspective, turning a side-scrolling platformer into an exercise in pure dread. You are not fighting thugs, you are fighting the gaze of a monster who can kill you with a look. The rule is not to fight back, but to hide. Then the facade of medicine and science burns away completely. Poison Ivy's arrival forces the island into its final, aggressive form, as massive vines tear apart the architecture you thought you knew. She represents a force beyond institutional control, and you are forced to choose between the madness of man and the fury of nature. Both are trying to devour you. You can try to seal the madness away. If you purge every threat and defeat the Joker, you are left in a silence that tastes the same as safety until it does not. The island is contained, but the question of its influence remains, a poison left in your mind. If you fail, the asylum simply swallows you. You become another one of its ghosts. The system does not reveal monsters, it manufactures them by demanding you sort the world into predator and prey. It codifies madness into architecture and weaponizes fear into a game mechanic. In a world that insists you must descend into the madhouse to restore order, is survival worth the price of knowing you are just another one of its inmates? As of 2009, the superhero game was a known quantity, a predictable loop of power fantasies. But what happens when the fantasy curdles into a nightmare and the asylum housing the monsters is a monster itself? You are asked to decide where the madness truly begins when the walls themselves are screaming. Rocksteady's Batman, Arkham Asylum presents as a story of the Joker taking over a mental institution. It parallels our world's uncomfortable relationship with incarceration in ways designed to feel hauntingly familiar. This is not just a third-person action game, it is a study of how architecture becomes a weapon and atmosphere becomes a verdict. Your world collapses to Arkham Island, a place divided into wings of suffering where every intercom chime demands your attention. The official broadcasts from Warden Quincy Sharp deliver a story of control, a facade of order that feels authoritative. Meanwhile, the whispers in the walls and the scrawls on the floor hint at a darker, more aggressive truth. You distrust the institution, yet you must navigate its corridors because survival seems to require walking through its very heart. The first phase is a descent into a system already rotting from within. The intensive treatment unit is your entry point, a space of falling elevators and armed men where every turn reveals another dead body. This is not a rescue, it is an archaeological dig through layers of institutional failure. Making it outside feels like a breath of fresh air, a moment of reprieve. Only it is a lie. The island begins to fight back, turning your perception of safety inside out. At first, the exterior environments feel secure, patrolled by guards who carry themselves with confidence. But as the Joker's chaos spreads, these once safe paths are corrupted. They are replaced by crooks with snipers, by wandering inmates, by crazed lunatics who blur the line between patient and predator. The open air that once felt like freedom now feels like exposure. You take solace in the cramped interiors and low-lit shadows you once sought to escape. A state agent arrives in the form of Warden Sharp, his voice a constant, distorted chime broadcast across the island. Initially, his announcements Project Control, a bureaucratic ritual meant to soothe. But the Joker seizes this channel, weaponizing it to taunt you, to inform inmates of your presence, to make you feel like a rat in a maze where the maze itself is watching. You are never alone. What this means is that surveillance is not a tool for order, but a stage for psychological torment. You descend into the medical facility and find the institution's quiet violence made manifest. Restraining chairs, rusted cages, and cruel metal appendages give you the impression that the inhabitants here may not be the only monsters. You find a popular suicide spot where an inmate can leap to the rocks below, and you realize the building itself offers an escape it was designed to prevent. The rule is not a safeguard, it is a story about who deserves to be broken. Then the paperwork arrives, not on paper, but in the ghostly form of the Chronicles of Amadeus Arkham. Deciphering these spiritual breadcrumbs sanitizes the island's history into a collectible, a bit of lore. You are no longer just fighting thugs, you are piecing together a founding evil, becoming complicit in understanding a madness you are supposed to be curing. The founder himself went mad, turning his asylum into his own tomb. His spirit never left. The island's supernatural theme is no longer a feeling, it becomes a physical presence. The hulking form of Killer Croc, the way poison ivy twists the botanical gardens into an aggressive jungle, they are extensions of the island's will. Their designs are as aggressive as the architecture. The island and its inhabitants look like they have been to hell and back, and they have brought a piece of it with them. For a moment, the arrival of more guards suggests order might return. The familiar protocols and professional chatter offer a fleeting sense of stability against the encroaching chaos. Then, the facade burns. The Joker unleashes his Titan formula, and what you feared most, an army of monsters born from the asylum's own experiments, walks the grounds with impunity. The institution did not contain the threat, it created it. If you purge the island of every threat, the silence that follows tastes the same as safety until it does not. If even one trace of the madness remains, the night will come for you from inside the walls you fought to secure. You can leave the island, but the question of what the island made of you lingers. It is a poison in your mind. The system does not reveal monsters, it manufactures them by demanding you navigate a world built from cruelty. The rusted cages, the broken floors, the very atmosphere is a testament to a sickness that infects everything it touches, including you. In a world that insists you must descend into its madness to restore order, is survival worth the price of never truly leaving the asylum behind? It is just past midnight on Arkham Island, and the system has already failed. But what happens when the asylum's walls become a mirror, reflecting the very brutality they were built to contain? You are asked to decide what separates a hero from a monster when the only tools you have are your fists. This is not just a breakdown of a combat system, it is a study of how brutal efficiency becomes its own kind of madness. The free-flow combat of Arkham Asylum was never just about fighting thugs, it was about codifying violence into a perfect, rhythmic ritual that feels dangerously close to a dance. Your world collapses to this one island, a sprawling monument to institutional decay. The Joker's distorted voice crackles over the asylum's intercom, delivering daily verdicts that twist sanity into a joke. You follow the trail of bodies and chaos because survival seems to require this complicity, this descent into the heart of the machine. Day 1 introduces the rhythm. You face a circle of unarmed inmates and the rules are simple: strike, counter, repeat. Every punch costs nothing but a press of a button, turning your scrutiny of the enemy into a fluid, almost thoughtless physical response. The explanations are simple: they are criminals. You are justice until you notice that this dance rewards momentum over mercy. The rule is not about safety, it is a story about who controls the chaos. Then the blade arrives, forcing you to choose between a swift counter and a broken combo, revealing a symbolic truth. The knife-wielding enemy is not just another thug, he is an interruption in your perfect rhythm, a test of your focus. He weaponizes your own momentum against you, a reminder that the system you have mastered can be turned, twisted, and used to bleed you out. He is the first sign that this perfect violence has a price. The stun baton follows. The electric crackle of the cattle prod demands a new approach, a vault, and attack from behind. This enemy is the state agent archetype in its most primitive form, protected by a tool of control that makes a direct assault impossible. To defeat him, you must adopt the tactics of a predator, not a brawler. You become the thing that strikes from the shadows because the direct application of force is no longer enough. You finally turn your gaze inward through the lens of detective mode. You see a world of skeletons and heartbeats, a simplified, clinical view that strips away the humanity of your opponents. You see them not as men, but as threats to be neutralized. You are the executioner and the analyst, the judge and the evidence, trapped by a system that feeds on your own calculated detachment. For a moment, the arrival of Bane, the hulking titan, the state-sanctioned monster, suggests a return to a simpler order. He is a boss, a clear objective to be overcome through a learned pattern. But then the facade burns. Joker unleashes the Titan formula, and what you feared most, a force that mirrors your own brutality but lacks all restraint, now walks the halls with impunity. They are a perversion of your own methods. You can try to maintain your perfect rhythm, a dance of non-lethal takedowns that feels clean. You can lean into the brutality, using throws and ground pounds that border on the monstrous. Or you can become the ghost, using fear and stealth to avoid the dance altogether, isolating your targets one by one. Each choice is a verdict on who you are becoming in the dark. The system does not reveal monsters, it manufactures them by demanding you sort the world into threats and objectives. It gives you a rhythm for violence and calls it justice. In a world that insists you must perfect brutality to survive, is survival worth the price of forgetting the man behind the mask? As of 9 p.m., the world is a maze of iron and whispers. The Joker has turned Arkham Island into his personal kingdom, and you are its sole, unwanted guest. But what happens when the only way to hunt a monster is to become one yourself? You are asked to decide who deserves fear when you are just as trapped as they are. This is not just a story about one dark night on a forgotten island. It is a study of how the tools of a predator are forged. It is an examination of how the mechanics of stealth and surveillance become the architecture of terror, a system you both dismantle and perpetuate with every silent takedown. Your world collapses to the cold stone of Arkham, a sprawling prison divided into medical bays, crumbling cell blocks, and overgrown gardens. The Joker's voice crackles through the asylum's intercom, a constant broadcast of madness that feels like the only authority left. Meanwhile, the quiet hum of your own technology, your detective mode, offers a different kind of truth, a colder, more clinical one. You distrust the clown prince of chaos, yet you become his mirror, using the same shadows and whispers to turn his hunters into your prey. Phase 1 begins in the claustrophobic interiors. The rule is simple: be the thing that goes bump in the night. This introduces the fear system, a mechanic that turns your actions into a weapon. Every gargoyle you perch on, every grate you disappear into, costs your enemies their composure, turning professional henchmen into panicked children. Their dialogue shifts from confident threats to desperate prayers. The system is not a power-up, it is a story about how a legend is built, one terrified whisper at a time. Then the nightmare arrives, forcing you to choose between facing your own trauma and succumbing to it. The Scarecrow sections twist the world into a psychedelic hellscape where the hunter becomes the hunted. Suddenly, you are the one hiding from a monstrous gaze, cowering behind crates as a searchlight sweeps the floor. This encounter reveals a symbolic truth. The fear you so expertly weaponize can be turned back on you, unmasking the fragile man beneath the cowl. Phase 2 pushes you outside, where the rules have changed. The island's exteriors, once a brief respite, are now more dangerous than the hallways you just escaped. Snipers nest on crumbling guard towers, their laser sights painting a target on your back. To survive, you must rely on detective mode, an X-ray vision that strips the world of its humanity. People become glowing skeletons, color-coded for threat levels. You are no longer navigating a world, you are analyzing a dataset of potential deaths. Finally, you spend precious energy to look inward, and the Joker's taunts echo a terrifying possibility. In the final confrontation, he injects himself with the Titan formula, becoming a grotesque parody of the very monsters you have been fighting. He mirrors your brute strength, your single-minded focus, your capacity for violence. You are the executioner and the source of his final transformation, trapped by a system that demands a monster to defeat a monster. In the end, you can drag the Joker's unconscious body out into the dawn, a trophy from a night of brutal survival. You can purge the island of his influence, restoring a fragile, temporary order. You can walk away, knowing the cycle will begin again. But if you rely too heavily on the terror you command, if you spend too much time viewing the world through a lens that sees only threats, the world eventually names you what you became. The asylum does not reveal monsters, it manufactures them by demanding you sort people into predators and prey. In a world that insists you must weaponize fear to survive, is survival worth the price of becoming the thing everyone fears? As of 2009, the superhero game was a known quantity. But what happens when the cage is just as mad as its inmates? You are asked to decide where the monster truly lives, in the cell or in the walls themselves. This is not just a look back at a classic title, it is a study of how atmosphere becomes a mechanic and how an institution's architecture codifies its own particular strain of madness. Batman: Arkham Asylum was never a simple story about the Joker taking over. It was about an island fighting back, using the very systems meant for control as weapons of chaos. Your world collapses to the shores of Arkham Island, a place divided into claustrophobic wards and rain-slicked courtyards where every corner holds a verdict. The official broadcasts from Warden Sharp promise order, a return to control that feels hollow and distant. Meanwhile, the Joker's voice crackles over the asylum's intercom, a constant, taunting whisper that unmasks the institution's brutal truth. You distrust the system, yet you follow its rules because survival on this island demands a terrible kind of complicity. The night begins with the illusion of order. You escort a restrained Joker through the halls of the intensive care unit, a ritual of control that feels secure, almost sterile. The combat is a rhythm, a clean dance of strikes and counters that reinforces your power. It is a story the asylum tells itself, that madness can be contained, that monsters can be neatly categorized and filed away, but then the facade shatters. The first phase ends not with a bang, but with a laugh. Joker is free, and the new rule is chaos. Your advantage erodes, forcing you into the shadows, up to the gargoyles that watch over the asylum like stone vultures. This is not just stealth. It is a weaponization of architecture. You are no longer a hero walking the halls, you are a predator using the building's bones to hunt, turning the asylum's oppressive design against its new masters. The cage has become your tool. The second phase introduces a terrifying inversion. Scarecrow's toxin does not just create an enemy, it rewrites the rules of reality. You are now the prey, navigating a fractured, side-scrolling nightmare where a single gaze means death. This is not a fight you can win with your fists. It is a puzzle of pure fear, proving that the deadliest prison was never made of brick and steel, but of your own mind. The asylum's physical horror is nothing compared to the architecture of your own dread. Your investigation leads you to a new truth, a bureaucratic horror hidden in files and audio logs. You discover the story of Amadeus Arkham, the asylum's founder, a man who descended into the same madness he sought to cure. His spirit, a legacy of righteous cruelty, now infects Warden Sharp. The state agent is not a savior. He is the institution's original sickness given a new host, proving that the system was never designed to heal but to punish and consume. Then the island itself begins to scream. Poison ivy arrives, and with her, the asylum's rot becomes literal. Massive, unnatural vines tear through stone and steel, turning familiar paths into hostile jungles. Traversing these spaces is no longer about stealth. It is about survival against a force that wants to swallow the facility whole. The rule is not a safeguard, it is a story about a world reclaiming itself from the failed ambitions of men. Finally, the paperwork arrives, not a file but a formula, the Titan Serum. This is the game's ultimate moral test, sanitized into a chemical equation. You are not just fighting monsters, you are fighting the blueprint for their creation. Stopping its spread feels less like heroism and more like risk management in a laboratory of lives. You are not saving people, you are preventing the proliferation of a plague born from the asylum's own dark science. For a moment, the final confrontation suggests a return to the old rules. You face Titan Joker, a physical threat to be neutralized. But the fight is not a test of strength, it is an examination of your entire journey. You use every tool, every piece of knowledge you have gained from the island's brutal lessons. You are not just fighting the Joker, you are fighting the asylum itself. You can save the day, stop the plan, and restore a fragile order to the island. You can walk out of the gates, leaving the broken institution behind as the sun rises, but another ending waits in the silence that follows. If you purge every threat, if you master every shadow and neutralize every monster, the quiet you have earned tastes the same as isolation. You are left alone, unchanged by the night, having merely proven you are the most effective creature in the cage. The system does not reveal monsters, it manufactures them by demanding you sort the world into predators and prey. In a world that insists you must weaponize fear to survive, is survival worth the price of becoming the perfect hunter? As of this night, the asylum's walls contain the madness. But what happens when the one man holding the keys is the architect of the chaos? You are asked to decide who is the monster and who is the victim, when the island itself seems to have made its own verdict. This is not just an analysis of a game from 2009. It is a study of how an institution designed to heal becomes a machine that weaponizes fear, codifying madness into a geography of punishment. It parallels the oldest stories we have about the places we build to hide away the people we fear. This is not just about stopping a madman, it is a study of how atmosphere becomes an antagonist and how the rules of survival turn you into a predator. Your world collapses to Arkham Island, a place divided into corridors of dread and gardens of decay, where every intercom chime demands a verdict. The official broadcast from Warden Sharp delivers daily platitudes that feel hollow, while the Joker's twisted transmissions whisper a darker truth directly into your ear. You distrust the system, yet you move through its arteries because survival seems to require complicity. Day 1 introduces the first rule: the island is a closed system. The Joker's escape is not a breach, it is an inversion of power. The asylum is now his and you are the lone trespasser. Your first cost is certainty, as every shadow could hold an enemy and every ally is a potential hostage. The inmates' explanations for the chaos sound reasonable until you realize they only echo the logic of their new master. The rule is not a safeguard, it is a story about who is truly in control. Then the state agent arrives, not as a savior but as a victim. Commissioner Gordon is taken, forcing you to choose between a direct, reckless assault and a slower, more methodical infiltration. This choice reveals a symbolic truth: the institution's authority is gone, and you must become your own law in a place where all laws have been rewritten by a clown. Phase 2 introduces the Titan formula. This is not just a chemical, it is the game's core theme made manifest. It turns scrutiny of the island's corruption into physical labor you perform on others, fighting monsters born from the asylum's own dark science. Checking the source of this plague costs you precious time and energy. The formula does not create monsters, it simply unmasks the monstrousness that was festering in the island's heart all along. You finally turn your focus inward through the psychedelic trials of the Scarecrow. He forces you to look at your own deepest fears, showing you the signs of the very madness you are fighting. The system does not just test you, it infects you. You are the hunter and the hunted, the judge and the evidence, trapped in a nightmare that feeds on your fear of becoming what you fight. Paperwork arrives not as a form but as a cure. Dr. Young's research notes offer a choice that feels cleaner than a trigger pull but accomplishes the same goal: an end to the madness. You are no longer just fighting, you are racing to decipher a formula, allocating risk and hope from a page of scientific secrets. It is violence sanitized by procedure. For a moment, the island seems to stabilize. You find a cure for the Titan formula, a path back to order. Then the facade burns away. Joker injects himself, becoming the final, catastrophic failure of the institution he commandeered. What you feared most, the complete triumph of chaos over reason, now walks the halls with impunity. There are no clean exits, only degrees of contamination. Seal the asylum and you are left with the silence, unsure if you saved anyone or only delayed the inevitable infection of the world outside. If even one drop of Titan remains, the madness will find a way to seep through the cracks. If you purge every threat, the quiet tastes like safety until it becomes the sound of isolation. If you cross too many moral lines, the world you save will only remember you as the monster you had to become. The system does not reveal monsters, it manufactures them by demanding you sort the mad from the sane in a world built by both. In a place that insists you must become a predator to survive, is survival worth the price of the hunt? As of 2007, the superhero video game was a punchline. But what happens when the asylum housing the joke becomes the most serious place on Earth? You are asked to decide where the monster ends and the architecture begins. This is not just a retrospective, it is a deep dive into how a single location can become a character, a judge, and a cage for your own morality. Batman: Arkham Asylum was not just another third-person action game. It was a study of how atmosphere becomes a weapon, how a building codifies the madness it claims to contain. Your world collapses to Arkham Island, a place of gothic medicine and modern brutality, where every distant chime demands a verdict. The Joker's voice, broadcast over the asylum's official intercom, delivers daily taunts that feel both chaotic and authoritative. Meanwhile, the island itself whispers a darker truth through its decaying walls and the tortured souls trapped within them. You distrust the clown prince of crime, yet you move through his maze because survival requires you to play his game. Night 1 begins with the illusion of control. The Joker is restrained, the hallways are orderly, and the island's exterior feels like a breath of fresh air after the claustrophobic intensity of the processing wing. The initial rules are simple: follow the trail, rescue the commissioner, restore order. But then, the Joker breaks free and the island begins to turn against you. This is the second phase. The secured exteriors, once a safe haven, become more dangerous than the interiors as snipers replace guards and crazed inmates wander the paths. The very environment is weaponized, and you learn that safety is a memory, not a location. The island is not just a setting, it is a story about who has lost control. A figure of institutional order, Warden Quincy Sharp, arrives not as a savior but as a ghost haunting his own creation. His pride in capturing criminals, displayed like trophies in the Arkham mansion, reveals a deeper sickness. You realize his obsession with cleansing Gotham is not a safeguard against madness, but another form of it. Sharp is the system's true face, a man who built a cage so elaborate he trapped himself inside. You finally turn your gaze inward, using your detective vision not on a criminal trail, but on the asylum's history. You find the chronicles of Amadeus Arkham, the founder, and discover that you have been walking through a monument to one man's grief turned into institutional cruelty. You are not just a detective tracking a villain, you are an archaeologist unearthing a forgotten horror, trapped by a system that feeds on its own tragic past. Paperwork arrives in the form of patient interview tapes, and with it, a choice that feels cleaner than a punch and accomplishes the same moral judgment. You listen to the sanitized confessions and psych evaluations of men like Victor Zsasz, and you sort them into categories of sane and insane, curable and lost. You are no longer just fighting criminals, you are participating in the bureaucratic machinery that labels and condemns them. For a moment, the arrival of Bane, a hulking monster born of the island's secret experiments, suggests a return to simple, physical conflict. Then the facade burns away. You realize the Titan formula is not just a weapon, it is the asylum's philosophy made flesh, a process that doesn't cure madness but perfects it into a monstrous, controllable form. What you feared most was never the Joker's chaos, but the institution's brutal, calculated order. You can try to escape with the survivors, descending into the Batcave unsure if you saved anyone or only sealed yourself in a tomb. If you purge every last one of the Joker's henchmen, the silence tastes the same as safety until you realize you are utterly alone. If you cross the line, if you give in to the brutality the island demands, the world names you the very thing you fought against. The asylum does not reveal monsters, it manufactures them by demanding you sort people into lives worth saving and lives to be contained. In a world that insists you must become a predator to survive, is survival worth the price of becoming the ghost that haunts the cage? In 2009, one game proved that a superhero story could be a horror story. But what happens when the asylum you are meant to cleanse is not just a building, but a state of mind? You are asked to decide where the madness truly lies when the walls themselves are screaming. This is not just a retrospective, it is an examination of how a single night on a forgotten island weaponized architecture to map the geography of a broken psyche. Released over a decade ago, Batman: Arkham Asylum confines you to its decaying halls, making its claustrophobia feel uncomfortably personal. This is not just an action game, it is a study of how an institution designed to cure becomes a machine that consumes. Your world collapses to Arkham Island, a prison of Gothic spires and forgotten wards where every distorted intercom chime demands a verdict. The official broadcasts from Warden Sharp deliver a narrative of control and rehabilitation, a story of order. Meanwhile, the whispers from the Joker's hijacked airwaves tell a darker truth about the chaos just beneath the floorboards. You distrust the system, yet you move through its corridors because for this one night, survival requires you to play by its rules. Day one, or rather, hour one, begins with a ritual of containment. You escort a restrained Joker through the intensive treatment wing, a procedure that feels safe, almost sanitized. The mechanical cost is your vigilance. You watch every twitch, every sneer, turning scrutiny into a performance of power you enact on your greatest foe. This initial march feels like a victory lap until the trap is sprung. The procedure was not a safeguard, it was a Trojan horse. Then the asylum fights back. The Joker's broadcast seizes control, turning the warden's chimes into taunts and surveillance into a threat. Your every move is now narrated by the madman you brought here, instilling a chilling sense of isolation, as if the entire gallery of rogues is watching you navigate a maze designed just for you. Even the claustrophobic vents forcing you into a first-person perspective feel like a labyrinth built to disorient and trap. An ideologue arrives not in chains but as the master of ceremonies. The Joker does not just want to escape, he wants to prove a point, forcing you to choose between saving the innocent doctors and pursuing him directly. He reveals the symbolic truth of the asylum, that it is not a prison for madness but a stage. You become both actor and audience in his grand, violent play. Then, the true nature of the island's sickness begins to surface. You discover the chronicles of Amadeus Arkham not through force but through careful inspection. These audio logs and hidden messages arrive like paperwork, and with them comes a choice that feels cleaner than a punch but accomplishes the same moral verdict. You are no longer just fighting thugs, you are auditing the asylum's soul, piecing together a history of sanitized violence and institutional decay. The Scarecrow nightmare introduces a terrifying alternative. You are pulled into a psychedelic hellscape where the rules of predator and prey are inverted. You are now the one being hunted. Here, you are forced to move through a world built from your own fear, to see the institution through the eyes of its most terrified victims. You finally look inward and realize the madness you fight is also the madness you carry. You are executioner and suspect, judge and evidence, trapped by a system that feeds on your deepest anxieties. For a moment, the asylum's original purpose seems to reassert itself. You descend into the sewers and the old Batcave, places of methodical science and rational order, a brief return to the logic of your crusade. Then the facade burns. Poison ivy is unleashed, and the island's botanical gardens become a monstrous, writhing jungle that tears through stone and steel. What you feared most, a total loss of control, now walks the halls with impunity. The system does not simply contain monsters, it manufactures them by demanding you sort the world into saviors and damned. You can purge the island, leaving it silent and clean, but the silence tastes the same as isolation until it does not. You can embrace the fear, becoming a more brutal hunter, but in doing so, you become a reflection of the asylum's own cruelty. Or you can simply survive the night, forever marked by the choices made in its haunted corridors. In a world that insists you must descend into the madness to defeat it, is survival worth the price of becoming the institution you swore to destroy? As of 8 years ago, the start of Arkham Knight seemed simple, a city evacuated under the threat of fear. But what happens when the first casualty, the spark that lights the fuse, is not just a random victim but a ghost from Gotham's past? You are asked to decide if a man's final act was a sacrifice or just another piece of stagecraft in a much larger, more cruel performance. The theory is not new, but it persists with a chilling logic. It argues that the man in the red hoodie, the smoker in Polly's diner whose terror ignites Scarecrow's city-wide ultimatum, is none other than Lonnie Machin. This is not just a fan theory about a cameo, it is a study of how a forgotten revolutionary, a boy named Anarchy, becomes a martyr for a cause he would have despised. Your world collapses to this single diner booth, seen through the lens of a security camera and a news report. You are given only 2 channels of information, the symbols left behind and the face of the dead. One channel whispers of a radical past, while the other presents a convenient, anonymous corpse. You must choose which story to believe because the truth determines whether this was a random act of terror or a deliberate, final signature. The first piece of evidence is the clothing. You watch him lift the cigarette to his lips, shrouded in a red hoodie almost identical to the one Anarchy wore as his costume in Arkham Origins. The color is a uniform, a memory of a boy who tried to burn down a corrupt system with bombs and ideology. This is not just fabric, it is the ghost of a failed rebellion sitting in a diner and waiting for the end. Then you see the symbol. Your gaze is drawn to the table where he sits, where a deliberate, scratched letter A is carved into the wood. Lonnie left this same mark all over Gotham as his calling card, a spray-painted promise of chaos for the corrupt. The symbol is not a random act of vandalism. It is a story about who was here, a final piece of graffiti before the fear gas made everything else irrelevant. The news report delivers the final, incriminating image. After the massacre, a clear shot of the man's face appears on screen, now lifeless. You compare it to the Anarchy from a decade ago, and the resemblance is uncanny. The boy aged into the weary face of a man who has seen his revolution fail. He becomes the perfect sacrifice, a man willing to die for a message, any message, as long as it tears down the world that broke him. But then, the counter-theory arrives and the certainty shatters. The red hoodie could belong to Jason Todd, whose own Red Hood persona uses the same color. The A on the table could stand for Arkham Knight, and you know Jason was Scarecrow's right-hand man, the perfect agent to stage this demonstration. The game's own files even label the character model Demon Todd. The facade of a simple answer burns away. You have 2 suspects for the same crime, 2 ghosts wearing the same color. One is a failed revolutionary willing to die for one last, grand gesture. The other is a vengeful son staging the opening act of his war against his father. The evidence supports both, a deliberate ambiguity designed to make you question who truly died that night. You can believe he was a pawn, a nameless face used by Jason Todd to trigger the attack before disappearing. You can believe he was Jason himself and the body on the news was just another victim, a convenient lie for the cameras. Or you can believe he was Anarchy, the last true anarchist whose final act was to become a tool for the very terror he once fought against. The system does not just reveal monsters, it erases histories, turning ideologues into anonymous casualties. Lonnie Machin wanted to tear down the legend of Gotham's elite, only to have his own story potentially erased, his final stand mistaken for the work of another. In a city that insists you must become a symbol to be heard, what is the price of being forgotten? For years now, a theory has whispered through the code of the Arkham games, a ghost in the machine. It is a story about inheritance, about the sins of the father becoming the flesh of the son, and about a mask that hides more than just a face. But what happens when the procedure of surgery becomes a ritual of succession, a passing of a torch from one monster to another? You are asked to decide who truly pulls the strings when every clue is designed to mislead. This is a deep dive into the connections that bind Gotham's nightmares, not just a summary of what you see on screen. The Arkham games are designed as contained tragedies, each one a single, terrible night. But what this really is a study of how a surgeon's scalpel becomes a tool for ideological transference, how one man's crusade is carved onto the face of another. Your world collapses to the shadows between Arkham City's steel mills and operating theaters. One channel of information comes from official case files, the cold, hard facts of a madman mauled by a beast in the sewers. But another channel, a whisper in the architecture and the abandoned tools, hints at a darker truth. You distrust the madness, yet you must follow its breadcrumbs because understanding seems to require this descent. Day 1 is the attack. You see Scarecrow dragged away by Killer Croc, his face torn, his reign of terror seemingly ended by brute force. Checking the aftermath costs you your sense of security, turning a simple news report into a question of survival. The explanations sound final until you notice they only account for the physical, not the psychological. The attack is not an end, it is a story about a vacancy. A new villain is needed, a new face for fear. Then, a surgeon arrives, a man named Thomas Elliot, forcing you to choose between the risk of a known evil and the risk of a meticulous, unknown one. He carves away faces, remaking himself in the image of Bruce Wayne, revealing that identity is just flesh, a mask that can be peeled back and replaced. His hideout is not just a clinic, it is a workshop for creating new monsters from old parts. Inside that same surgical theater, you find the evidence. You find canisters of fear gas scattered in a corner. You find feathers on the floor, the sigil of the crow. You find the faint, whispering voices from Scarecrow's own nightmare realm bleeding through the walls. This is not a coincidence, it is a consultation. The paperwork arrives in the form of a new face, one surgically reconstructed not just to hide scars, but to embody them. Scarecrow's new appearance in Arkham Knight is a choice that feels cleaner than a simple mask and accomplishes the same transformation. He is no longer just a man in burlap, he has become a living effigy of terror, his skin itself a testament to his philosophy. You are no longer looking at a victim, you are witnessing a coronation. You finally turn the scalpel inward, spending precious energy to look at Hush's own obsession and discover he is not just building a new face for himself, but for others. He is the architect of Gotham's new horrors, the man who gives its monsters their masks. You are witness to the creation, judge of the evidence, trapped by a system that feeds on your need for answers. For a moment, the clean lines of the surgical tools and the sterile environment suggest order has been restored, that a broken man has been put back together. Then the facade burns. The new Scarecrow emerges not healed but weaponized, walking the streets with a face that is no longer a wound but a manifesto. What you feared most has been given a surgeon's precision. You can seal the files and walk away, unsure if you have solved a mystery or only delayed the inevitable rise of the next nightmare. If even one hint of this collaboration remains, the fear will come for you from behind a new, unfamiliar face. If you accept the official story, the silence tastes the same as ignorance until it does not. If you connect the dots, the world names you what you have become, a witness to a conspiracy of monsters. The system does not just punish monsters, it gives them new life by demanding you accept the surface story. In a world that insists a surgeon's only job is to heal, is survival worth the price of ignoring the ones they choose to create? Some theories are just whispers, scattered breadcrumbs left for us to find. They suggest a different story hiding in plain sight, written in subtle dialogue, in deliberate omissions, in the blank spaces the developers left behind. Sometimes these theories are nothing more than noise. And sometimes they rewrite everything you thought you knew. Let's begin with theory number 4. Catwoman is the illegitimate daughter of the crime boss Carmine Falcone. This is a story that has echoed through the comics for years, a narrative that binds the city's greatest thief to one of its oldest criminal dynasties. It was never confirmed in the Arkham universe, left only as a phantom possibility. But the whispers are there if you know where to look. Years ago, before the walls of Arkham City were even built, you can find a quiet clue inside the Gotham City Police Department. On a chalkboard detailing the Falcone crime family, beneath a list of Carmine's daughters, a single name is written at the bottom, followed by a string of question marks. Selena, the game offers no confirmation, only a question hanging in the air. This isn't a fact, it is a story about who might belong to whom, a hint that a legacy of crime might be coded into her very blood. Fast forward 6 months. You are inside Blackgate Prison and Carmen Falcone speaks of a secret vault, its password the name of a woman, Louisa. You can find this vault yourself, tucked away in maximum security. Inside, a data pack from the Riddler waits, and his words are a poisoned dart aimed directly at Falcone's secret. He taunts the old man about Louisa, about letting the cat out of the bag. The wordplay is no accident. What this means is the ledger you find is more than just a record of corrupt judges. It's a ledger of lives, a story of a hidden daughter, a secret buried in plain sight. The final piece falls into place nearly a decade later in the basement of the Arkham City courthouse. You stand before Calendar Man and he speaks to Catwoman not as a thief but as an heir. He mentions the Falcone mess, then asks a chilling, casual question about her birthday, about what she expects from her father this year. He is not just implying a connection, he is stating it as fact. The theory becomes a verdict. In this world of orphans and broken families, Selena Kyle is not just a stray. She is royalty, the unclaimed daughter of a fallen king, and her entire life has been a war against the name she never even knew she carried. Now we descend into the second theory, the fifth whisper. The woman who died at the end of Arkham City was not the real Talia al Ghul. You remember the scene. You stand in the Monarch Theater, a place haunted by death. Talia drives her sword into the Joker's back only to be cut down by a bullet moments later. Her body falls, but then the great twist reveals itself. The healthy Joker was a phantom, a performance by Clayface. And after the chaotic battle that follows, after the theater is reduced to rubble and silence, you notice something is wrong. Talia's body is gone. It is simply not there. You could dismiss it as a developer's oversight, a convenient way to clear the battlefield. But that doesn't explain what happens next. You carry the Joker's body out into the night, not hers. Why would you leave her behind? Unless the body truly was never there to begin with. The most damning evidence is not what you see, but what you don't. There is no blood. Just minutes before, you watched Ra's al Ghul drive the same sword through Hugo Strange, and the wound was real, the blood a stark confirmation of mortality. When that same blade pierces the Joker, there is nothing. A clean wound on an impossible body, a perfect clue that this is not flesh and blood but living clay. So when Talia is shot, you see no bullet wound, no bloodstains spreading across her clothes. There is nothing. What this means is you are not watching one performance but two. Clayface was not just impersonating the Joker, he was also impersonating Talia al Ghul. The logic is cold and perfect. There is no body to carry out because her form was reabsorbed into Clayface's monstrous transformation. There is no blood because Clay does not bleed. Cut content found within the game's files confirms this was the original intent, a fight against a twisted, Talia-themed version of the monster, a final, horrifying reveal. The real Talia, the woman you knew just moments before, died somewhere off-screen. She was likely murdered by Clayface as soon as she led him to the Lazarus pit, her purpose served, her identity stolen. She became a mask for the monster, a puppet in a tragedy designed to break you. In the end, it changes nothing, and yet it changes everything. Talia is dead one way or another, her body added to the morgue in Arkham Knight, your grief a heavy shroud in the evidence locker. But the story of her death becomes a darker, more intricate betrayal. You did not watch your love die, you watched a monster wear her face as it died in her place. The system does not just reveal monsters, it uses them to hide the truth, to twist love into a weapon and grief into a final, bitter joke. In a world that insists you must see things with your own eyes to believe them, what happens when your eyes can no longer be trusted? As of this moment, a thug in Arkham Knight stands guard on a Gotham rooftop. You have defeated him a dozen times before, but this time he is different. He is a ghost, a repurposed asset hiding a story the game never meant to tell. But what happens when the code itself becomes a confession? You are asked to decide where the character ends and the data begins. This is not just a collection of fan theories, it is a study of how a game's discarded pieces become a kind of truth. The world of Arkham is littered with ghosts, digital remnants of cut content, and repurposed models that tell a story of their own. A story of expediency, of development shortcuts that accidentally create lore. Your world collapses to the game's files, a place of cold, hard data where every texture map and audio log demands a verdict. The official narrative, delivered through cutscenes, feels authoritative, yet the whispers from unused assets and developer oversights hint at a darker, stranger truth. You distrust the simple explanation, yet still play by the game's rules because discovering the hidden story seems to require this digital archaeology. Theory number 6 introduces a chilling possibility. Victor Zsasz walks among the cultists of Deacon Blackfire, hidden in plain sight. Checking it costs you your certainty, forcing you to look past the character model's hair and beard and into the raw facial structure beneath. A modder strips away the disguise and you see it. The cheekbones, the brow, the cold glare, they are identical. The evidence sounds circumstantial until you find the game files. Zsasz's unused knife, a relic from his scrapped side mission, is not deleted. It sits inside Deacon Blackfire's folder, a digital fingerprint left at the scene. The repurposing of an asset is not just a developer's shortcut, it is a story about how one monster can wear the face of another. Then, theory number 7 presents a stalker. Jason Todd, the Arkham Knight, was watching you all along. You see the evidence in his headquarters, a photograph of Batman and Robin taken from a distance during the events of Arkham City. It is a photograph with a knife driven through its center. This is not just a piece of set dressing, it is a memory weaponized. You use a modded camera to trace the shot back to its origin, a lonely water tower overlooking Monarch Theater. The vantage point is perfect, just out of frame, just beyond your notice. He was there. He watched you meet your new apprentice on the same ground where he felt you had abandoned him. That water tower is not just a location, it is a monument to betrayal. You finally turn the lens inward into the game's deepest psychological space, Bruce Wayne's own mind. In the torture flashbacks, Joker holds up a picture to taunt Jason to show him he has been replaced. It is the exact same photograph taken from the water tower. This is impossible. The timeline does not fit, unless you realize you are not watching history. You are watching a memory constructed by Bruce. The photograph is there because in the back of his mind, Bruce knew. He knew someone was watching from that tower, and he connected that unseen stalker to the ghost of Jason Todd. You are the detective and the evidence, the player and the haunted mind, trapped by a truth that was never spoken but always felt. The game's code arrives, and with it, a choice that feels cleaner than a direct confession. The character files label Deacon Blackfire as himself, yet contains Zsasz's weapon. The cutscenes show you discovering Jason's identity, yet the flashbacks show you already knew. You are no longer just playing a story, you are auditing a memory, sorting through a spreadsheet of truths and convenient fictions. For a moment, the final reveal of the Arkham Knight suggests the mystery is solved. The mask comes off, the truth is laid bare, and the narrative finds its order. Then the facade burns away when you realize the real story was never about the Knight's identity, but about Batman's denial. What you feared most was not Jason's return, but Bruce's complicity in his own ignorance. You can accept the simple story, the one presented on the surface, where villains are who they appear to be and heroes are caught by surprise. You can believe that a reused model is just a shortcut and a photograph is just an asset, or you can descend into the code where the truth is messier. If you accept that Bruce always suspected, the entire emotional weight of the game shifts. It becomes a story not of shock, but of tragic, inevitable confirmation. If you see Zsasz in Blackfire's face, you understand that in Gotham, even identities are recycled. The system does not just create monsters, it reassigns their faces, hiding old ghosts in new bodies, leaving you to sort the living from the data. In a world that insists you must see only what is shown, is the truth worth the price of knowing you were lied to all along? For 10 years, the story has been settled. The Joker died, Batman grieved, and the city moved on from that single, terrible night in Arkham City. But what happens when the evidence you were shown was designed to deceive you? You are asked to believe in a death when the body has vanished. This is a deep dive into the ghosts that haunt the Arkhamverse, not just a summary of its endings. Today, we examine how the smallest details in a world built on lies can unmask its most devastating truths. This is not just a collection of fan theories, it is a study of how game design itself becomes a conspiracy, hiding uncomfortable possibilities in plain sight. Your world collapses to a single night, a sprawling prison city where every shadow and secret recording demands a verdict. The official story is broadcast over the loudspeakers, a neat narrative of heroes and villains. But in the code, in the whispers of thugs, in the very geometry of the world, a darker truth echoes. You distrust the official account, yet you accept its ending because survival in a story seems to require complicity. Day 1 introduces the first crack in the facade. You are told Talia al Ghul dies, shot by Joker in the Monarch Theater. The cutscene is clean, the grief is palpable, and the mission objective moves you forward. But the evidence doesn't align. When Hugo Strange is stabbed minutes earlier, he bleeds. When the fake Joker is stabbed, he does not. When Talia is shot, she also does not bleed, and her body vanishes the moment the fight begins. The game is not showing you a death, it is showing you an impossible performance. The rule is not a bug, it is a story about deception. An insider arrives, a fragment of cut content found buried in the game's files. It reveals an unused model, a version of Clayface themed to look exactly like Talia al Ghul. This was the original plan for Talia's body to melt away, revealing the monster beneath. The mechanic was cut, but the clues were left behind, forcing you to choose between the convenient fiction on screen and the chilling possibility buried in the code. Day 2 introduces a new rule, the convenient lie of Jason Todd's death. You see the videotape, a grainy recording of Joker pulling the trigger. The gunshot rings out, the screen cuts to black, and Batman's greatest failure is sealed in your memory. It feels final. It feels absolute until you look closer. In the nightmare sequences of Arkham Knight, Bruce's mind replays the scene. You watch from a different angle as Joker fires the gun, and from this new perspective, you see the truth. The bullet misses. It strikes the wall to Jason's right, never making contact. You are not witnessing a memory of a murder, you are witnessing Batman's subconscious admission that he was lied to. What this means is that Batman's guilt was never about Jason's death. It was about his abandonment. Then, paperwork arrives. Not a file, but a photograph shown to Jason during his torture. It's a picture of Batman with the new Robin, Tim Drake, proof that he has been replaced. But you recognize the photo. It's the exact picture Jason himself took from a hidden vantage point during the events of Arkham City. The timeline makes no sense unless you realize this is not Joker's evidence. It is Batman's mind filling in the blanks, connecting the stalker from Arkham City to the boy he thought was dead. You are no longer just an observer, you are inhabiting a mind that has known the secret all along but refused to believe it. For a moment, the official story seems to hold. Joker died, Jason was a ghost, Talia was a casualty. Then the facade burns away, the bullet misses, the body vanishes. The timeline warps. What you accepted as fact walks again, not as a character, but as a question mark carved into the narrative itself. The system does not reveal monsters, it manufactures them by asking you to accept an ending that the evidence screams is a lie. If you believe the official story, you find peace in a world with clear heroes and villains. If you believe the evidence buried in the code, you see a world where Batman was deceived for years. If you believe his subconscious, you realize he was lying to himself all along. If you accept that the developers left these clues on purpose, the story names you what you have become, a detective who knows the truth is a ghost. In a world that insists you must accept the story it tells you, is the truth worth the price of knowing nothing was ever real? As the credits roll on the final night, the official story feels sealed. A history written in police reports and evidence lockers. But what happens when the whispers in the alleyways tell a truer, darker tale? You are asked to decide where the performance ends and the truth begins when the stage itself is a city of lies. This is not just a collection of fan theories, it is a study of how a city's memory becomes a weapon. It is a post-mortem on a history that refuses to stay buried, exposing the fractures in the official record. Each inconsistency, each shadow in the background, is a ghost demanding a new verdict. Your world collapses to the crime scene of memory, where every archived file and every piece of stray dialogue is evidence. The official broadcast from the GCPD tells one story, a clean narrative of heroes and monsters. Yet the static between channels whispers of conspiracies, of identities swapped and deaths that were not deaths at all. You distrust the neat conclusion, yet still search for a truth that requires you to believe the impossible. The first file you pull is the Diner Massacre, the event that ignited the final night. The official report names no accomplice of note, just a footnote in Scarecrow's plan. But you rewind the security footage and see a figure in a red hoodie, an A carved into the table where he sat. This is not just a random thug, this is the ghost of anarchy, the ideologue who believed the city deserved to burn. His sacrifice becomes the spark, turning a terrorist plot into a political statement you were never meant to understand. Then you examine Batman's own case file, the record of his physical endurance. The reports chart his growth of facial hair over a single 8-hour night, a biological anomaly dismissed as stress. You cross-reference this with his ability to fight an entire army without fatigue, to shrug off injuries that would cripple a normal man. The evidence suggests not just peak conditioning, but a borderline in human biology. The rule is not about human limits, it is a story about a man who might not be a man at all. A state agent of a different sort arrives in the form of a surgeon's file. You pull the evidence on Jonathan Crane's reconstruction after Arkham Asylum. His face, mutilated by Killer Croc, was remade into a living mask of terror, but the medical records are sealed. Then you cross-reference the hideout of Thomas Elliot, the surgeon known as Hush. You find fear gas canisters, crow feathers, and whispers on the audio logs, revealing a secret collaboration. Hush was not just a killer, he was the artist who sculpted Batman's fear into flesh. Paperwork arrives, this time from the Falcone crime family archives, and with it, a choice that feels cleaner than a confession. A scrawled note on a family tree lists a secret daughter with a question mark, Selina. This is not just a ledger, it is a sanitized document that rewrites a cat burglar into a tragic heiress, twisting her independence into an inheritance of violence. You are no longer observing a criminal, you are tracing a bloodline back to the city's corrupt heart. You finally turn the camera inward, replaying the final moments of Arkham City in your mind, and you see what you were forced to ignore. You watch Talia die, but you see no blood, no bullet wound. Her body vanishes from the floor the moment your back is turned. You remember Joker's own bloodless wound just moments before, the telltale sign of Clayface. You are executioner and witness, judge and evidence, suddenly realizing the woman you mourned may have been nothing but a clay-forged illusion. For a moment, the official story that Joker died, that Batman would have saved him, feels like an order restored. It is the neat, moral conclusion the city needs to believe. Then the facade burns. In the quiet of your own mind, you hear Crane's accusation. You let him die on purpose. You see the memory again, the cure slipping from your grasp, and you confront the chilling possibility that it was not a mistake, but a choice. A choice you made and then buried so deep you could convince the world and yourself it never happened. You conceal the records and accept the official history, unsure if you preserved justice or only buried the truth. If the whispers are true, the greatest deceptions are the ones you tell yourself. If you purge the inconsistencies, the silence tastes the same as certainty until it does not. If you accept the darker truths, the world names you what you became that night. Opt out of the framework entirely and you escape the verdict, not the doubt. The system does not just catalog monsters, it manufactures them by demanding you sort illusions from truths. In a world that insists you must be a symbol to inspire hope, is that symbol worth the price of the lies it is built upon? As of this moment, you think you know who lived and who died. But what happens when the bodies disappear, when the faces behind the masks become interchangeable, and every death is a potential lie? You are asked to decide who deserves a final, certain truth when the world itself is built on deception. The Batman Arkham series presents a world of masks, myths, and carefully constructed falsehoods. It parallels our own struggle to find certainty in chaos in ways designed to feel uncomfortably familiar. This is not just a collection of fan theories, it is a study of how narrative doubt becomes a weapon, turning every inconsistency into a ghost that haunts your understanding of justice. Your world collapses to the city of Gotham, an open-air asylum where every shadow could hold an ally or an executioner. The official story is broadcast on the news, a clean narrative of heroes and villains, of lives saved and lost. But whispers in the code, glitches in the matrix, suggest a darker truth. You distrust the convenient endings, yet you follow the story because survival seems to require accepting the official lie. Day 1 begins with a simple question of identity. A man in a red hoodie sits in a diner, an A deliberately scratched into the table beside him, and in one terrible moment, he becomes the catalyst for the city's fall. Checking the evidence costs you your sense of security, turning a simple news report into a conspiracy. This man could be Anarchy, the forgotten revolutionary, a perfect martyr for Scarecrow's cause. He could be Jason Todd, the right-hand man, testing the very toxin that will break the city. The rule is not about who he was, it is a story about who the system needed him to be in that moment. A forgotten agent of chaos arrives, forcing you to choose between the convenient truth and the haunting possibility. Lonnie Machin, the boy anarchist from years ago, vanished from the record, but his methods linger. The red hood, the symbol, the willingness to become a sacrifice for a message, it all fits. To believe he is the smoker is to believe that old ghosts can return to set the world on fire. To believe it was Jason is to accept a simpler, colder logic. The choice reveals that in Gotham, even a corpse can wear a mask. But then the questions turn from the faces of others to your own. You see a photograph from a decade ago, a clean-shaven man who, over the course of a single 8-hour night, grows a full stubble of a beard. You witness him shrug off injuries that would cripple a normal man and fight an entire army alone without rest. These are not just game mechanics, they are signs, symptoms of a body pushed beyond any human limit. You finally spend precious energy to look inward and discover the impossible truth you have been ignoring all along. The high testosterone, the rapid recovery, the seemingly limitless endurance is this peak human conditioning, or something more. You are executioner and suspect, judge and evidence, trapped by a system that demands you believe in a man while showing you a monster. Paperwork arrives in the form of game files, and with it, a choice that feels cleaner than a trigger pull and accomplishes the same disappearance. A character model for a serial killer named Victor Zsasz is repurposed, given a new beard and a new name, Deacon Blackfire. In the code, the two are one. You are no longer fighting a cult leader, you are fighting a ghost, an identity erased and overwritten by the needs of development, sanitizing one monster by dressing him in the skin of another. For a moment, the final confrontation in the theater suggests order has returned. Talia al Ghul stands as your ally, a blade in her hand and justice in her heart. Then the facade burns. A gunshot rings out, but her body shows no wound, sheds no blood. She falls, but when the chaos clears, her body is simply gone, vanished as if it were never there. What you feared most, that nothing is real, walks the stage with impunity. Seal the door and trust what you saw, unsure if you witnessed a murder or a magic trick. If that Talia was Clayface in disguise, then the real woman died long before, off-screen and alone, her death a secret kept from you. If you believe the simple truth, then Batman left the love of his life on a theater floor to carry out the body of her killer. If you accept the lie, you admit that your senses can be weaponized against you. Either way, the silence that follows tastes the same as betrayal. The system does not reveal monsters, it manufactures them by demanding you sort people into lives and deaths based on missing bodies and contradictory evidence. In a world that insists you must accept a comforting lie to survive, is survival worth the price of never knowing the truth? As the clock tower strikes midnight, the city of Gotham is a sealed tomb, evacuated and surrendered to fear. But what happens when the ghost haunting its streets wears a familiar mask, moves with a familiar rage, and knows your every secret? You are asked to decide if the man you failed is a monster or a mirror. This is not just a story about one long Halloween night, it is a study of how memory becomes a weapon and how denial becomes a kind of prison. The game frames this as a military invasion, a siege orchestrated by Scarecrow. In reality, it is a trial, and the Arkham Knight is both prosecutor and evidence. Your world collapses to the rain-slicked streets of Gotham, a maze of gargoyles and fear. The broadcast channels deliver Scarecrow's ultimatums, a clear and present threat you are trained to fight. But it is the whispers from the ghost in your head, the Joker, that hint at a darker truth, that the real war is not for the city, but for your soul. You distrust the Phantom, yet you listen to his taunts, because survival seems to require complicity with your own madness. The first phase begins with an encounter at Ace Chemicals. The Arkham Knight anticipates your every move, countering your tactics with a chilling intimacy. This is not just military training, this is personal. His knowledge of your methods costs you time and tactical advantage, turning a rescue into a desperate escape. This precision is not a safeguard for his army. It is a story he is telling you about your own failures, written in the language of combat you taught him. He knows who you are. The thought is a splinter of ice in your mind, then you find the photos. In the militia headquarters, you discover a shrine of surveillance, images of you and Robin taken from a distance. One photograph, stabbed through the center with a knife, stops your breath. It is a moment from years ago on a rooftop in Arkham City, a private conversation now framed as evidence. The Knight was not just a new player in the game, he was a ghost who had been watching you all along, turning your life into a case file. He was building his argument. The supportive insider, Barbara Gordon, is ripped from your world, her voice severed from the comms. In her place, the state agent arrives, the Arkham Knight, whose militia acts with the brutal efficiency of a scalpel. He forces you to choose between saving the city and confronting the past, revealing that the greatest threat is the one you created and refused to mourn. His very existence is an accusation. And then, the excavator. Trapped beneath the city streets, the Knight corners you, his voice stripped of its modulator, raw and familiar. He calls you Bruce. The sound is a verdict. It is in this moment you spend the precious energy to look inward, to replay the fractured memories Joker torments you with. You see a flash of a videotape, a gunshot that you now realize in the quietest part of your mind, never truly connected. You see a photograph of you and the new Robin, the very same one you just found, held in Joker's hand during the torture. You are executioner and suspect, judge and evidence, trapped by a system of grief that feeds on your fear of the truth. Paperwork arrives in the form of a scannable riddle, and with it, a choice that feels cleaner than a confession. Scanning the photos confirms the stalker was Jason Todd. You are not just fighting a war, you are auditing a ghost, allocating his rage to a neat box labeled the Arkham Knight when you have always known, it belonged in a grave you never dug. For a moment, as you rise from the wreckage, the city seems stable, the mission clear, defeat Scarecrow. Then the facade burns away. The final confrontation is not with an army, but with a single, unmasked face from your past. What you feared most now stands before you, asking why you left him to die. There are no branching outcomes here, only a single, terrible truth. You can seal yourself away in the Nightfall Protocol, but you cannot escape the knowledge that you knew. You knew when he countered your tactics at the chemicals plant. You knew when you saw the photograph on the wall. You knew the instant he said your name from behind the controls of a killing machine. The system does not reveal monsters, it manufactures them by demanding you sort people into saviors and failures, the living and the dead. In a world that insists you must sacrifice a son to save a city, is the cowl worth the price of becoming a liar? As of this exact moment, you have captured him again. The Joker is in your custody, the night is quiet, and the asylum gates are sealed. But what happens when the cage is not a prison, but the very heart of the trap? You are asked to decide who is sane and who is mad when the asylum itself is the greatest monster of all. Released in 2009, Batman, Arkham Asylum was more than an action game, it was a descent. It parallels the feeling of a world held together by procedure, where the rituals of control feel reassuring right up until they shatter. This is not just a story about a hero and a villain, it is a study of how an institution designed to contain madness becomes a machine for manufacturing it. Your world collapses to the island of Arkham, a place of Gothic spires and subterranean secrets where every intercom chime delivers a verdict. The broadcasts from Warden Sharp promise order and rehabilitation, a clinical facade of control. But through the static, you hear the Joker's whispers, taunting you, telling you a darker truth about the place and your part in it. You distrust the madness, yet you must navigate its rules because survival seems to require playing along. The first phase begins with procedure. You walk the Joker down the long hall of intensive treatment, the restraints feeling secure, the guards confident. The mechanical cost is your own vigilance, turning a simple escort mission into an inspection of every shadow, every flicker of a security camera. The rules sound reasonable until you notice they are built on the assumption of failure. The protocol is not a safeguard, it is a story about who truly runs this place. Then the system breaks. Joker is free and the island is turned against you. The hallways that were once orderly are now trashed, the walls graffitied with insults and threats. The guards who presented a front of control are now bodies on the floor or prisoners of the lunatics they once watched. You move through the same spaces, but the script has been flipped. You are no longer the enforcer, you are the intruder. A state agent arrives in the form of Commissioner Gordon, forcing you to choose between securing him and pursuing the source of the chaos. To save your ally is to risk letting the Joker's plan escalate. To chase the Joker is to risk Gordon's life. The encounter reveals a symbolic truth. In this system, protecting one person often means sacrificing the security of everyone else. Your choices are already being weaponized against you. You finally use your own detective skills, that forensic gaze you turn on others to look inward. You track the madness back to its source, only to find the Titan formula, a serum that twists bodies into monstrous forms. You realize the very criteria for monstrosity is being manufactured right here, under the noses of the authorities. You are the detective and the evidence, trapped in a system that feeds on its own sickness. The paperwork arrives in the form of Amadeus Arkham's journals, scattered across the island. Piecing them together feels cleaner than a direct confrontation, but it accomplishes the same unmasking of the institution's rot. You are no longer just fighting thugs, you are an archivist of insanity, discovering how one man's grief codified the island's cruelty, turning personal tragedy into bureaucratic punishment. For a moment, the mission to create a cure suggests that science and order can return. You gather spores, you analyze formulas, you chase a solution. Then the facade burns away. Poison ivy makes the island's flora grow wild, tearing apart the very foundations of the asylum, and what you feared most, a total loss of control, walks the halls as Titan-fueled monsters. You conceal yourself inside with the last of the sane, unsure if you have saved anyone or only delayed the inevitable. If you purge every threat you find, the silence tastes like safety until you realize you are completely alone. If you cross the line and give in to the brutality, the world outside these walls will name you for what you became in the dark. Or you can opt out of the framework entirely, facing the source of the chaos head-on, escaping the choice but not the cost. The system does not simply contain monsters, it demands you sort the world into the sane and the unsalvageable, the curable and the damned. In a world that insists you must enter the asylum to restore order, is survival worth the price of becoming its most permanent resident? It is well past midnight on Arkham Island, and the lunatics are running the asylum. But what happens when the architecture of madness is not just in the minds of the inmates, but in the very bricks and mortar of the place meant to contain them? You are asked to restore order to a world where the walls themselves are whispering for chaos. The game is not just a brawler, it is a study of how an environment becomes a weapon. This is about a place designed to punish, not to heal, and how its very design turns predator into prey and back again. The asylum itself is the true antagonist. Your world collapses to a single, isolated island, a prison built on a foundation of whispers and rust. The Joker's voice crackles over the intercom, an official channel of chaos delivering new rules for his deadly game. You distrust the entire institution, yet you follow its winding corridors and claustrophobic vents because survival requires you to navigate the madness on its own terms. The first phase is a lie. The Joker is restrained, the guards are confident, and the system appears to be working exactly as intended. Then the trap is sprung, and the hallways you once walked freely become a gauntlet of armed men and broken minds. The cost is your sense of control, turning every corner into a potential ambush. The rule is not about security, it is a story about who is truly in charge. An intruder arrives not from outside the walls, but from within your own mind. Scarecrow's fear toxin does not just create monsters, it unmasks the ones already there. You are forced to choose between the reality of the fight in front of you and the psychological horror he projects onto it, revealing that your greatest enemy is your own perception of fear. He weaponizes your trauma. The second phase introduces the Titan formula. You see its effect on others, turning men into hulking, mindless beasts. Checking their monstrous forms costs you precious seconds in a fight, turning your tactical advantage into a desperate scramble. This is not just a strength enhancement. It is the asylum's core philosophy made manifest, an ideology that believes the only way to control a monster is to become a bigger one. Then you descend into the sewers and the hunt begins. Killer Croc, a force of nature, arrives to test you. You cannot fight him directly, you must outmaneuver him, turning his own environment against him. The encounter reveals a symbolic truth. In Arkham, you do not defeat your demons head-on. You survive them by understanding the terrain of their madness better than they do. You finally face the asylum's brutal procedures in their rawest form. Cages that seem too small for a man, restraint chairs that look like instruments of torture, and treatment logs that read like confessions. You start to see the line blur between patient and prisoner, between care and punishment. The paperwork of this place does not document healing. It is a ledger of sanitized violence, turning cruelty into a routine. For a moment, the asylum's history suggests an order to the chaos. You find the chronicles of Amadeus Arkham, the founder, and it seems you are walking in the footsteps of a man who tried to impose logic on the illogical. Then the facade burns away. You learn that the warden, Quincy Sharp, believes he is the reincarnation of Arkham's spirit, driven mad by the very institution he commands. The system has consumed its master. The endgame is not a choice you make, but a conclusion that was written from the moment the gates closed behind you. If you give in to the brutality required to survive, the island names you its newest inmate. If you believe you can cleanse the asylum, you only become part of its cycle of violence. Opt out of the Joker's final, monstrous game and you do not escape the cost. You only postpone the verdict. The asylum does not reveal monsters, it manufactures them, demanding you sort broken people into categories of containment and punishment. In a world that insists you must become a beast to tame the beasts, is survival worth the price of becoming the thing you hunt? As of this night, the asylum holds the madness. But what happens when the madness holds the asylum? You are asked to decide who is the monster when the cage itself is the first horror. Your world collapses to this island, a monument to gothic decay and clinical cruelty, where every shadow holds a whisper and every intercom crackle demands a verdict. The official broadcast is the warden's sterile assurance of order, a promise that feels authoritative and hollow. But another channel, a chaotic, laughing frequency, hints at a much darker truth. You distrust the institution, yet you must navigate its blood-slicked corridors because survival seems to demand you play along with the madness. This is not just a prison break, it is a study of how institutional failure becomes a weapon. Day one begins with a simple, chilling reversal. The Joker is not your prisoner, you are his guest. The cost is your certainty, as the asylum's rusted machinery is turned against you, weaponizing the very tools meant for healing. Corridors that were once patrolled by guards now belong to the inmates, their graffiti a new and violent scripture scrawled on the walls. The rules are not safeguards, they are a story about who is truly in control. Then the state agent arrives, not as a savior but as another cog in the machine. Commissioner Gordon, a man you trust, is taken, forcing you to choose between a direct assault that risks his life and a stealthy path that risks your own. His capture reveals a symbolic truth. In this place, even symbols of justice become liabilities, pawns in a game where the rules are rewritten by laughter. The line between protector and accomplice begins to erode. You descend deeper and the asylum's architecture becomes a physical manifestation of its sickness. Intensive treatment is a maze of locked doors and electrified floors, its restraining chairs and surgical tables telling a story of torture long before the riot began. The medical facility is a strange balance of the hyper-sanitized and the unkempt, a facade of care peeling back to reveal a history of brutal experiments. This is a place that punishes the body to get to the mind. It is a machine for breaking people. Eventually, paperwork arrives not on a clipboard but as a formula. The Titan Project, a serum designed by a well-meaning doctor and funded by the Joker in disguise, offers a choice cleaner than a trigger pull. It promises to create an army, turning human bodies into monstrous weapons. You are no longer just fighting a man, you are fighting an idea, a contagion spreading through the veins of the asylum itself. You are not just stopping a riot, you are containing a plague. For a moment, it appears the system might stabilize. You find a hidden Batcave, a pocket of familiar order carved into the island's rotting heart, a sanctuary. Here your technology works, your mission feels clear, and the outside chaos seems manageable. It feels like control is possible. Then the facade burns. Poison Ivy, awakened and enraged, unleashes the island's true nature, twisting the botanical gardens into a hostile, alien landscape. Vines tear through stone and steel, reclaiming the asylum for a power far older and more primal than its human architects. What you feared most now walks the halls with impunity, and the island itself is fighting back. You finally turn your focus inward, analyzing the Joker's poisoned blood now coursing through your own veins. You discover you have been carrying the madness inside you all along. You are the cure and the disease, the hunter and the hunted, trapped by a system that has made your own body the final battleground. You are both executioner and suspect. If you purge every threat and confront the Titan-fueled clown, you restore a broken kind of order. The island is quiet, but you walk out carrying the body of your nemesis, a chilling mirror of how you walked in. You have won, but the victory tastes of ash and failure, the silence ringing with the ghost of a final laugh. The system does not just contain monsters, it manufactures them by asking you to stare into the abyss until you see your own reflection. In a world that insists you must become a part of the madness to stop it, is survival worth the price of the cure? As of that first night in Arkham City, the world already believed Jason Todd was dead. But what happens when a ghost refuses to stay buried and instead begins to photograph your every move from the rooftops? You are asked to decide what is real when the evidence is written in whispers and scars. This is not just a breakdown of fan theories, it is an autopsy of a city's memory, a study of how every scratched symbol and missing body becomes a testament to a truth Batman himself refuses to see. The Arkham games are not simply stories about a hero. They are a system of layered secrets, a world where the past is a weapon aimed at the present. Your world collapses to a single diner at the start of the final night, a place where a man in a red hoodie waits with a lit cigarette. A state-sanctioned broadcast delivers warnings of an attack, while a whisper from a scratched letter A on the table hints at a darker, more personal war. You are told this is a citywide threat, but every clue points inward toward a single, catastrophic failure. It begins here. Day 1 of the city's fall introduces a new rule: look closer. The man in the red hoodie is dismissed as a random casualty, but the camera lingers. You see the A carved into the table, a symbol of anarchy you might remember from years ago. This isn't a coincidence, it is a story about who Gotham chooses to sacrifice first, but checking the evidence costs you your certainty. The man's face, seen for a moment on a news report, could be an older, more desperate Lonnie Machin, the boy who once tried to burn the city's corruption down. Or it could be someone else. The rule is not a safeguard, it is an accusation that turns everyone into a suspect. Then, a ghost from Arkham City arrives, forcing you to choose between the official story and a chilling possibility. In Thomas Elliot's surgical hideout, amidst the tools used to steal Bruce Wayne's face, you find evidence of another patient. Fear gas canisters, cockroaches, and the faint sound of whispers. This is where Scarecrow was remade, his face carved into a permanent mask of terror. Hush was the surgeon turning a man's trauma into a living effigy. What this means is that Gotham's villains do not work in isolation. They are a quiet network, trading in pain and identity. But the city's ghosts have a hierarchy. Anarchy is a whisper, Hush a scalpel in the dark. The Arkham Knight is a scream. You find his headquarters, a desecrated shopping mall wallpapered with photographs of you and your new Robin. Each one is a violation, a memory stolen and weaponized. One photo stands out, a knife driven through its center. It's a rooftop in Arkham City, the exact moment Robin delivered the line launcher. You finally turn your gaze inward, back into the fractured memories of Jason Todd's torture. Joker shows him a picture of you with the new Robin, proof of his replacement. And you realize with a cold dread that it is the same photograph, the one taken from the water tower in Arkham City. You have been carrying the evidence of Jason's survival inside you all along. You are not just the detective, you are the crime scene. A new kind of paperwork arrives, not on paper but in the digital files of the game itself. A character model labeled Demon Todd. The face on the news report, the man in the red hoodie, it was him. The system sanitizes the violence of this revelation. You are no longer just fighting a war, you are reviewing the archived footage of a betrayal. For a moment, the mask and the army suggest a new enemy has arrived. The Arkham Knight is a stranger, a force of tactical precision you cannot predict. Then the facade burns. He speaks Bruce's name, and what you feared most is standing right in front of you, pointing a gun at your head. Seal the windows and descend into memory, unsure if you ignored the evidence or simply refused to believe it. If even one ghost remains, the night will come for you from inside your own mind. If you purge the truth, the silence tastes the same as justice until it does not. If you accept what you have done, the world names you what you became, a keeper of a terrible secret. You can opt out of the mystery entirely, but you cannot escape the cost of your blindness. The system does not hide monsters, it catalogs the evidence of their creation, demanding you connect the clues. In a world that insists you must sacrifice a son to save a city, is survival worth the price of becoming a ghost yourself? It is one night on an island prison, and the world has gone mad. But what happens when the asylum's most decorated patient is the one writing the rules? You are asked to decide what justice means when the line between sanity and survival has already been erased. The story begins in 2009 with the release of a game that would redefine the superhero genre. It was never just about a simplistic plot of the Joker seizing control of a mental institution. It was an invitation into a system designed to feel claustrophobic and deeply personal. This is not just an action game, it is a study of how an environment becomes a weapon and how surveillance becomes a verdict. Your world collapses to Arkham Island, a sprawling cage of Gothic architecture and modern decay, where every intercom chime demands your attention. The official broadcasts from Warden Quincy Sharp deliver a story of order and control, a thin veneer of sanity stretched over the abyss. Meanwhile, the Joker's voice hijacks the system, whispering a darker, more chaotic truth directly into your ear. You distrust the madness, yet you are forced to play by its rules because moving forward seems to require complicity. The first phase begins with a ritual. You escort a restrained Joker through the halls of intensive treatment, the asylum's machinery humming with a false sense of security. The process feels authoritative, a display of power you have earned. But the cost is your own vigilance, lulled into a dangerous comfort just before the trap is sprung. The procedure is not a containment, it is a performance designed to make you the star of a tragedy. Then, the performance shatters. The Joker, an external intruder now acting as the island's warden, breaks free and turns the asylum against you. The hallways you just walked become trashed and graffitied, transforming familiar ground into hostile territory. Inmates, once contained, now roam free, turning every corner into a potential ambush. The rules have not just changed, they have inverted, and you are no longer the enforcer. You are the hunted. A state agent, Commissioner Gordon, becomes a pawn in this new, twisted game. His capture forces you to descend deeper, navigating the island's rot to save the last symbol of official order. Following the trail leads you to a confrontation with Bane, an enforcer whose raw power reveals a chilling truth. The asylum was never a place for healing. It was a laboratory, and you have been walking through the aftermath of its most monstrous experiment. Day becomes a long, unending night, and a new rule is introduced by an unlikely ideologue, Poison Ivy. As her plants tear through the island, wrapping vines around the stone facades, the environment itself becomes your enemy. The very ground fights back, its growth fueled by the same chemical corruption that created the Titan monsters. This is not just chaos, it is a story about how a system's poison eventually consumes the system itself. And then, the system forces you to look inward. Scarecrow arrives not as a physical threat, but as a psychic one, weaponizing your own mind against you. You descend into nightmares where the roles are reversed, where you are the prey, helpless against an inescapable gaze. You finally spend precious energy to look inward and discover the same fear and vulnerability that you exploit in others. You are executioner and suspect, judge and evidence, trapped by a system that feeds on your deepest anxieties. The paperwork arrives in the form of Amadeus Arkham's chronicles, scattered whispers that sanitize a century of violence. You piece together the story of the asylum's founder, a man who descended into the very madness he sought to cure, turning treatment into torture. You are no longer just fighting thugs, you are an archaeologist of institutional cruelty, uncovering a history that explains the present horror. You are allocating blame within a spreadsheet of ghosts. For a moment, the arrival of Batman's own technology suggests order has returned. You establish a makeshift Batcave, a small pocket of logic and control within the overwhelming chaos. Then the facade burns. The Joker injects himself with the Titan formula, becoming the system's final, monstrous product. What you feared most now walks the halls with impunity, a perversion of strength born from the island's dark heart. You can try to seal yourself away, but the uncertainty remains. If even one drop of the Joker's poisoned blood remains in your veins, the night will come for you from inside your own mind. If you purge the island of every threat, the silence tastes the same as safety until it does not. If you cross too many lines to win, the world names you what you became in the struggle. There is no clean exit, only the cost. The system does not reveal monsters, it manufactures them by demanding you sort the world into predators and prey. It asks you to become a perfect, brutal instrument of order to combat perfect, gleeful chaos. In a world that insists you must descend into the madness to defeat it, is survival worth the price of becoming the thing you fear most? As of this moment, every cage is locked, every monster is accounted for, and every rule is in place. But what happens when the one thing you fear most is not the monster in the cell, but the ghost in your own head? You are asked to decide what is real when madness wears your face. The events of Arkham City left the world with a body, but they left you with a virus. A sickness that began as a whisper in your blood and now, under the influence of Scarecrow's toxin, has been given a voice. This is not just a psychological haunting. It is a study of how memory becomes a weapon, how grief becomes a cage you build for yourself. Your world collapses to the confines of your own mind, a sprawling, decaying funhouse where every shadow takes his shape. The official broadcast is the reality you fight for, a city to save, allies to protect, a mission to complete. But an independent channel, a cackling, parasitic signal, broadcasts a darker truth directly into your skull. You distrust the madness, yet it feels more real than anything else because survival seems to require you to listen. Night 1 is a test of foundations. The new rule is simple: ignore the voice. Each time you see him perched on a rooftop or reflected in a storefront window, you are meant to look away, to treat the hallucination as nothing more than a glitch in your perception. But ignoring him costs focus, turning your own discipline into a resource he drains with every taunt. His explanations sound like the ramblings of a dead man until you realize they target your deepest failures, weaponizing your code of ethics against you. The rule is not a safeguard, it is a story about the cracks in your armor. Then he arrives as the supportive insider, the one ghost who truly understands. He is the only one who knows the weight of the cowl, the only one who appreciates the grim theater of your crusade. He offers tactical advice, mocks your enemies, and reminds you of the punchline you both share. Choosing to listen feels like a betrayal, but choosing to ignore him feels like fighting this war utterly alone. He reveals a symbolic truth: your greatest enemy is also your most intimate companion. Paperwork arrives in the form of a memory, and with it, a choice that feels cleaner than a trigger pull. The hallucination forces you to relive the night you chose not to save him, to watch him die again and again. You are no longer a hero making a hard choice, you are a failure reliving the verdict, allocating risk in a spreadsheet of lives that always ends in his favor. You finally turn your gaze inward, examining the infection spreading through your thoughts. You discover you have been showing the same signs all along. The same obsessive drive, the same willingness to sacrifice everything for one principle, the same madness. You are judge and evidence, trapped by a system that feeds on your fear. For a moment, the mission suggests order has returned. You purge the cloudburst, you save the city, you corner Scarecrow. It feels like a victory. Then the facade burns. He seizes control, twisting your perception until the world itself becomes his playground. What you feared most now walks through the corridors of your mind with absolute impunity. You are no longer in control. He is. You can try to seal him away, locking the memory in the deepest part of your mind, but you are left unsure if you saved yourself or only delayed the inevitable. If even one trace of his madness remains, the night will come for you from inside the walls. If you purge him completely, the silence tastes the same as safety until it does not. The quiet is a reminder of what you have lost, the other half of your own story. If you fail, if you let him win, the world names you what you became. The system does not reveal monsters, it manufactures them by demanding you stare into the abyss until it stares back. The Joker's true fear was never death, it was being forgotten. It was the terror that after all the chaos and all the pain, he would become nothing more than a bad memory, a passing nightmare in a world that moves on. In a world that insists you must become a monster to defeat one, what happens when you discover the one you are fighting is already inside you? It is the year 2007, and the superhero video game is a joke without a punchline. But what happens when the punchline takes over the asylum and you are the only one left to hear it? What happens when the only way out is through the madness? The game is called Batman: Arkham Asylum, a title released over a decade ago that redefined what a hero could be in a digital space. It parallels a descent into a nightmare in ways designed to feel uncomfortably familiar. This is not just an action game, it is a study of how an institution built to heal becomes a machine that weaponizes suffering. Your world collapses to a single, haunted island where every flickering light and distant scream demands a verdict. The Joker's unhinged broadcasts deliver daily taunts that feel like scripture, while the warden's automated chimes whisper of an order that has already failed. You distrust the system, yet you follow its rules because survival seems to require complicity. Day one begins with a ritual. You escort the great evil back to his cell, watching the steel doors lock behind him, believing the performance of control is the same as control itself. The cost is your own certainty, turning a simple transfer into an act of self-deception. This is not a prison, it is a stage, and the Joker is merely waiting for his cue. The first phase introduces a new rule: the island itself is an enemy. As Joker breaks free, the very architecture twists against you. Corridors that were once sterile become canvases for his chaos, and graffitied walls become new, insane commandments you must decipher. The asylum is not a building, it is a story about who has the power to write the ending. Then, the nightmare arrives. Scarecrow pulls you into a world where the rules are inverted, where stealth is not a weapon but a symptom of your own terror. You are no longer the hunter. You are the prey. This mechanic is not a boss fight, it is a mirror, forcing you to confront the very fear you use to control others. Paperwork arrives in the form of a choice, cleaner than a trigger pull but accomplishing the same disappearance. You must choose who receives the cure for the Titan formula, a serum that turns men into monsters. You are no longer fighting, you are allocating risk, sanitizing violence into a cold, procedural calculation on a spreadsheet of lives. You finally turn your gaze inward, using your detective vision not to find clues but to see the infection spreading through your own veins. You discover you have been carrying the poison all along. You are executioner and suspect, judge and evidence, trapped by a system that has made you its next victim. For a moment, the arrival of reinforcements suggests order has returned. Uniforms and protocols create the facade of control, a brief return to the lie you told yourself at the beginning of the night. Then the facade burns, and the hulking, Titan-fueled monster you feared most walks toward you wearing the Joker's smile. You conceal the exits and descend into the darkness, unsure if you saved anyone or only delayed the inevitable. If you purge every threat, the silence tastes the same as safety until you realize you are utterly alone. If you cross too many lines, the world simply names you what you became. The system does not reveal monsters, it manufactures them by demanding you sort people into lives and deaths, saviors and damned. In a world that insists you must compromise your soul to survive the night, is survival worth the price of becoming the joke? As of 2009, the superhero game was a known quantity, a power fantasy of predictable arcs and easy victories. But what happens when the cage is more important than the hero, when the very walls are an extension of the villain's mind? You are not asked to save a city, you are asked to survive an idea. This is not just a review of a game. It is an examination of how atmosphere becomes a weapon, how a single location can codify the soul of its captor, turning architecture into an instrument of psychological punishment. Your world collapses to the cold stone of Arkham Island, an isolated monument to madness. The Joker is in chains, but you know this is a performance. It is a ritual, and you are the unwilling centerpiece. His surrender is the first move in a game where the board itself is designed to break you. Then, the facade shatters. With a single, effortless motion, the Joker is free and the asylum becomes his stage. The official broadcasts from Warden Sharp promise order, a return to control that feels hollow from the start. But it is the Joker's voice crackling over the intercoms that delivers the island's darker truth. You become a rat in his maze. The first phase of his plan is simple chaos, turning the intensive care unit into a slaughterhouse. This is not about escape, it is a declaration. Checking each corner costs you focus, each takedown turns scrutiny into labor you perform on his behalf. The rules are not a safeguard, they are a story about who truly holds the power here. Through the claustrophobic vents, you hear his taunts, his laughter echoing through the metal. He is watching, always watching. The first-person perspective is not just a mechanic, it is a forced intimacy with the island's suffocating machinery. You are made to feel small, hunted. Then the island itself begins to fight back. Poison ivy's vines tear through the sterile halls, a supernatural corruption that mirrors the madness spreading through the inmates. The asylum groans under the strain, its rusted cages and flickering lights testifying to a deep, institutional sickness that was present long before the Joker arrived. The place was always a monster, he just gave it a voice. Scarecrow arrives and the fight turns inward. He doesn't just attack your body, he weaponizes your own mind against you. You are forced to navigate a nightmare landscape where the rules of reality no longer apply, where the predator becomes the prey. This is not a battle of strength, but a test of will, revealing the symbolic truth that your greatest enemy is the fear of your own failure. The paperwork arrives in the form of Amadeus Arkham's chronicles, scattered whispers that tell a story of inherited madness. You are not just fighting the Joker, you are contending with the island's ghost, a spirit of despair that infects all who walk its grounds. The true villain is the idea that madness is a cycle, inescapable and eternal. For a moment, the arrival of the Batwing with new gadgets suggests order can be restored. Technology promises a clean solution to a problem of the soul. Then the facade burns away completely as Joker injects himself with the Titan formula, becoming a physical manifestation of the island's monstrous nature. What you feared most now walks the halls with impunity. The fight is a brutal, ugly thing. It is not a clash of ideologies but a desperate brawl in the mud. You use explosive gel on his hand, turning his own strength into the instrument of his defeat. You are no longer saving anyone, you are just ending the performance. The system did not reveal a monster, it provided him with the tools and the stage to fully become one, demanding you descend to his level to win. The island is quiet again, but the silence tastes the same as defeat. In a world that insists you must become a beast to cage another, is survival worth the price of that reflection in the mirror? By the end of the night, one man will be dead and the other will be dying. But what happens when the architect of the prison is not its true master, and the dying clown holds the only key? You are asked to decide who is the real monster when the walls have already fallen. This is not just a review, it is an autopsy of how a city-sized cage uses one villain as a facade to hide the true, creeping infection of another. Arkham City is a story of institutional failure masquerading as a tale of two madmen. This is a study of how a grand plan for order becomes a stage for spectacular, personal chaos. Your world collapses to a walled-off slum, a festering wound in the heart of Gotham where every broadcast and back-alley whisper demands a verdict. The authoritative voice of Hugo Strange delivers daily pronouncements of a coming purge, promising a clean slate through fire. Meanwhile, the wheezing, desperate laughter of a dying Joker hints at a far more intimate poison, a sickness that has already found its way into your own blood. You distrust the institution, yet you follow its rules because finding a cure seems to require complicity. The first phase introduces a simple, urgent diagnosis: you are infected. This sickness is the Joker's parting gift from the asylum, a ticking clock that binds your fate to his. The cost is your own mortality, turning a mission of justice into a desperate scramble for self-preservation. The search for a cure is not a noble quest, it is a story about how quickly your principles can bend when your own life is on the line. The second phase weaponizes this desperation. The Joker dangles the antidote just out of reach, forcing you deeper into the city's rotten core. Each lead costs you a piece of your focus, a fraction of your mission to stop Protocol 10. You see his supposed acts of chaos, the sniper in the bell tower, the war with Penguin, as mere distractions, until you realize they are symptoms of a plan that has nothing to do with the city and everything to do with you. Hugo Strange arrives as the state agent, a man who knows your name and promises order through extermination. He forces you to choose between stopping his systemic, impersonal slaughter and chasing the personal, intimate cure held by a clown. You realize his threat, Protocol 10, is a distraction from the real disease. The true villain is not the man who wants to burn the city down, but the one who wants to live inside your head forever. Then, the intruder appears not as a thug, but as a ghost from the past. Clayface, wearing the Joker's healthy face, tests your perception of reality itself. You fight what you believe to be the source of your infection, only to discover it is a perfect imitation. The fight reveals a terrifying truth. The Joker you have been chasing is a performance, and the real, dying man has been pulling the strings from the shadows all along. Paperwork arrives not as a form, but as a diagnosis slipped into your bloodstream. Joker's blood sent to Gotham's hospitals turns hundreds of civilians into ticking time bombs. You are no longer just saving yourself, you are now the carrier of a plague, and every punch you throw risks spreading the infection. You are not just fighting a villain, you are allocating risk within a city of dying lives. For a moment, the countdown to Protocol 10 suggests order can be restored. Strange's helicopters fill the sky, and for a terrifying second, his clean, systematic violence feels like a solution. Then the facade burns, a sword through the back, a tower exploding into the night, and the architect of the prison dies at the hands of his own master. What you feared most, a city run by a true ideologue, was merely a prelude to a personal vendetta. If you save the dying clown, you condemn the city to his legacy. But the choice is ripped from your hands. He lunges, the vial shatters, and you are left holding his cooling body, unsure if you failed him or if he simply forced your hand. If his cure is destroyed, the silence tastes the same as justice until it does not. If you carry his body out into the rain, the world names you what you became, the solemn guardian of your own worst enemy. You escape the choice, not the cost. The system does not reveal monsters, it manufactures them by forcing you to choose between saving a city and saving yourself. In the end, it was never about the prison. It was about the infection, the one that whispers from inside the blood, a joke told at the expense of your soul. In a world that insists you must compromise your code to survive, what is left of you when the laughter finally stops? On a cold Christmas Eve, 10 years before the asylum would fall, Gotham's criminal underworld operates on a simple, brutal logic. But what happens when that logic is twisted into a chaotic performance and you are the unwilling star? You are asked to decide what justice means when your greatest enemy is also your creator. Your world collapses to a single, snow-choked night in a city under siege. An official broadcast delivers the terms of your trial, a $50 million bounty on your head placed by the formidable crime lord Black Mask. Yet, a whisper on the police scanner, a pattern in the chaos, hints at a darker, more theatrical truth. You distrust the obvious threat, but you follow the script because survival seems to demand it. Day 1 is an audition. The terms are simple: survive the 8 assassins Black Mask has hired to hunt you. Checking their files costs you time, turning your investigation into a frantic race against a ticking clock you can't see. The explanations for their contracts sound professional, purely transactional, until you realize they are merely the opening act for a far more personal kind of violence. The bounty is not a contract, it is a story designed to draw you onto a stage. Then he arrives not as a kingpin but as an intruder, a ghost in the machine. The Joker, wearing Black Mask's face as a costume, forces you to choose between the predictable brutality of the mob and the terrifying randomness of a madman. His appearance reveals a symbolic truth. The organized crime you thought you were fighting was only a facade, a flimsy set piece for a much more intimate play. You finally turn your focus from the hired guns to the architect of the chaos and discover a chilling symmetry. You see a man defined by one bad day just like you, but where your tragedy forged a code, his forged a punchline. You are judge and jury, protector and target, trapped in a performance where the only rule is that there are no rules. The script changes. It is no longer about a bounty, it is a two-person show. A choice arrives that feels crueler than any trigger pull, staged in a room with an electric chair. The Joker forces you to choose: kill Bane to save yourself, or let the machine deliver its own verdict. You are no longer just fighting for your life, you are being asked to ratify a philosophy of violence with your own hands. For a moment, in the quiet of the Batcave, Alfred's voice suggests order can be restored. You believe you understand the enemy, that you can predict his madness. Then the facade burns away completely when Bane unmasks you, not to the world, but to your oldest friend. The chaos you feared most is no longer on the streets, it is in your home. This night offers several endings, each a verdict on who you have become. You can defeat the Joker, lock him away, and begin the long, repeating cycle of your war, forever bound to him. You can save Alfred, but lose the certainty that your life as Batman protects those you love. If you succumb to the pressure and kill, the silence that follows will taste the same as failure. If you break your one rule, the city names you the very thing you fought against. The system does not reveal monsters, it manufactures them by demanding you stare into the abyss and then asking why you flinched. The Joker was not born from a vat of chemicals, but from the moment he realized his tragedy could be weaponized. He simply needed a partner. In a world that insists you must dance with madness to restore sanity, is survival worth the price of becoming your reflection? As of this night, the city of Gotham is drowning in its own corruption. But what happens when the very figures meant to save it are the ones pulling it under? You are asked to decide who is the monster when the lines between savior and sinner have been erased. The story of Arkham Shadow is not just about one villain. It is a study of how a city's systemic rot infects its would-be champions, turning allies into antagonists. This is not just a detective story, it is a live autopsy of a city's soul, where the procedural work of justice becomes the machinery of personal ruin. Your world collapses to the island prison of Blackgate, a concrete tomb where every whisper and shadowed corner holds a piece of a fractured truth. Official reports tell you of a mysterious figure, the Rat King, unleashing chaos upon the city. But the quiet, unnerving analysis of Dr. Jonathan Crane suggests a different kind of plague, one that festers in the mind. You distrust the doctor, yet his logic is a scalpel, cutting through the city's lies. Day one begins with a simple premise. A masked terrorist known as the Rat King has crippled Gotham with an army of vermin, seeking to dismantle a corrupt legal system. His broadcasts are filled with righteous fury, and for a moment you might even agree with his diagnosis of the city's sickness. But his methods, pure, unfiltered chaos, turn his crusade into a plague. The rule is not justice, it is a story about who gets to burn the world down. Then Harvey Dent arrives, your friend and the city's district attorney, a beacon of order in the encroaching darkness. He works alongside you, his determination a mirror of your own. His presence is a comfort, a reminder that you are not alone in this fight to save Gotham's soul. He is the supportive insider, risking everything to uphold the law in a lawless place. But the whispers of Dr. Crane are constant, a clinical counter-narrative to the city's overt violence. He speaks of shadows, of the darker, malicious side that lives within everyone. His work is presented as rehabilitation, a way to cure the city's madness. What this means is his cure is a poison, designed not to heal but to expose and weaponize the darkness he finds. He is the state agent, his authority a mask for his true, predatory nature. You finally descend into the prison's depths, chasing a ghost. You navigate the dream like fragments of Harvey's past, seeing the abuse that fractured his mind, the seed of another personality planted long ago. You begin to understand that the Rat King is not just a man in a mask, he is a symptom. And then the reveal: the Rat King is Harvey Dent, his alternate self born from a lifetime of trauma and a city that betrayed his faith in justice. The horror is not that your friend is the villain. The horror is realizing you were helping the monster hunt itself. Just as this truth settles, Dr. Crane makes his final move. He is the true architect of this tragedy, the ideologue who saw Harvey's brokenness not as a wound to be healed, but as a weapon to be aimed. With a splash of acid, he carves the city's corruption onto Harvey's face, baptizing him in pain and finalizing his transformation. You are no longer fighting the Rat King, you are fighting Two-Face, a man whose every choice is now a coin toss between a forgotten ideal and a fresh scar. Seal the gates of Blackgate and you contain the monster, but the man is lost forever. If you purge the chaos, the silence tastes of failure, a hollow victory in a city that manufactures its own demons. If you cross too many lines to stop him, the world sees only another shadow in Gotham's alleys. You escape the choice, not the cost. The system does not simply reveal monsters, it manufactures them by asking you to sort the righteous from the ruined. In a world that insists you must sacrifice a friend to save a city, is survival worth the price of becoming a warden to their madness? As of 9 p.m. on Halloween night, Gotham City has been evacuated. The official story is that a madman with a chemical weapon has driven 6 million people from their homes, leaving behind only the criminals, the cops, and you. But what happens when the official story is just the first lie? You are asked to decide what is real when every truth has a shadow. The story of Arkham is never the one told on the television broadcast or in the case files you collect. It is a conspiracy written in blood on alley walls, in whispers that corrupt the official record, and in the faces of men who are not what they seem. This is not just a battle for a city. It is a study of how every mask, every convenient lie becomes a weapon. Your world collapses to the rain-slicked streets of Gotham, an open-air asylum where every shadow could be a threat. The official broadcast from Scarecrow delivers his grand design, a clear and present danger that feels authoritative in its terror. But the city itself whispers a different story, a darker truth etched into tables, hidden in abandoned boats, and buried in the code of the very game you play. You are forced to trust your own senses, even as the system works to convince you they are failing. Day 1 begins with a simple act of violence in a diner. You see a man in a red hoodie, a smoker whose fear infects everyone around him. When the news reports his death, you might see just another casualty. But then you look closer. The red hoodie mirrors the one worn by the anarchist Lonnie Machin. An A is deliberately scratched into the table where he sat, a symbol that could belong to anarchy just as easily as it could the Arkham Knight. This is not just a random victim. It is a calculated sacrifice, a story designed to be misread. The system presents you with 2 suspects for the same crime, the Zealot Anarchy or the ghost Jason Todd. It turns your investigation not into a search for truth, but into a choice between 2 equally unsettling narratives. The rule is not to find the culprit, it is to pick a monster you can live with. Later, you hear stories of the ventriloquist, a man named Arnold Wesker, supposedly killed in a shootout during the Arkham City incident. But then you enter the evidence room and find his display is not for him. It is for Peyton Riley, his successor. This is how the city works. It announces one death to hide another body, swapping one name for another on a morgue tag until the truth is just a clerical error. The supportive insider arrives in the form of Alfred's voice, a steady presence in your ear. Yet you find a hidden room in the warden's office, a blueprint for Arkham City that proves the asylum was always just a stepping stone. It reveals that the calm, institutional voice you trusted was complicit in a much larger, darker machine. Then comes the intruder, Jason Todd, the Arkham Knight. He knows your tactics, your fears, your name. His presence forces you to choose between the risk of believing a ghost has returned and the risk of facing a perfectly manufactured enemy, revealing the symbolic truth that your greatest failures have been given body armor and a gun. You are told that Jason Todd died. That Joker beat him, branded him, and broke him before putting a bullet in him. You see the videotape, a brutal, straightforward record of your failure, but then you look inward into the nightmare of your own mind. You see the moment again, but this time from a different angle. You see the bullet miss. It never even touches him. You realize with chilling certainty that you have been showing the same signs all along. The lie you told yourself to survive the guilt was just as powerful as any of Scarecrow's toxins. You are executioner and suspect, judge and evidence, trapped by a system that feeds on your own denial. Paperwork arrives not on paper but in the form of a choice. The Shadow War pits you between 2 assassins, Nyssa and her father, Ra's al Ghul. Curing him will lead to more death. Letting him die feels like murder. There is no trigger to pull, only a button to press, a selection that feels clean and procedural. You are no longer killing, you are allocating risk within a spreadsheet of lives, sanitizing violence into a binary choice. For a moment, the Nightfall Protocol suggests order has returned. You detonate Wayne Manor, destroying the symbol of Bruce Wayne and allowing Batman to disappear into myth. It is a clean ending, a final, authoritative act of control. Then the facade burns. Thugs on the street corners whisper of a new ghost, a demon bat that stalks the alleyways. The fear you worked so hard to contain now walks the streets with your face, wearing your symbol, twisted into something monstrous. You did not end the cycle. You only changed the shape of the monster. If you believe the official record, you saved the city and sacrificed yourself. But if even one whisper of the demon remains, the night will come for you from inside the walls you built. If you purge every villain, the silence tastes the same as safety until you realize you are the only monster left. If you cross too many lines, the world names you what you became, a killer. Opt out of the framework entirely and you escape the choice, not the cost. The system does not reveal monsters, it manufactures them by demanding you sort people into heroes and villains, into lives and deaths, into truths and lies. In a world that insists you must become a ghost to survive, is survival worth the price of becoming the thing that haunts you? As of this moment, every great hero has their definitive villain. But what happens when the villain becomes the system, the architecture of your fear, the very air you breathe? You are asked to decide not just who is the most dangerous, but which flavor of ruin truly defines a city's soul. This is not a simple ranking. It is an autopsy of ambition, a study of how a villain's plan becomes a city's scar tissue. First, you face the Joker, but not the force of nature you will come to know. In Arkham Asylum, he is a ghost in the machine, a whisper that weaponizes the very walls against you. His plan is not a frontal assault, but a corruption from within, turning a place of healing into a factory of monsters. This is a villainy of claustrophobia, where every taunt over the intercom is a reminder that the maze is the monster. His true genius here is not in brute force, but in making you complicit. You follow his breadcrumbs, you engage his lunatics, you play his game on his terms. He is not just a man you are chasing, he is the architect of the rules, and his victory is in forcing you to play at all. Then, you step into the sprawling cage of Arkham City, where two forms of evil vie for control. Hugo Strange represents the cold, sanitized tyranny of the state, a villain who sees people as data points to be purged. He speaks with the voice of authority, promising order through extermination, a bureaucratic violence that feels chillingly modern. He knows who you are under the mask, turning your own identity into a weapon pointed at your head. But his institutional menace is eclipsed by a far more personal horror. The Joker, now a dying animal, wages a war not for territory, but for legacy. He infects you with his own mortality, turning your quest for a cure into a frantic, intimate dance with death. This is villainy as a virus, a biological clock that binds your fate to his, proving that even a dying clown can poison the world one last time. He transforms the city into a stage for his final, bloody joke. Later, you are thrown back in time to a Gotham still learning what it means to be afraid. In Arkham Origins, a younger, more volatile Joker emerges from the shadow of another man's empire. This isn't about control, it's about obsession. He doesn't want to rule the city, he wants to possess its soul by breaking its protector. Here, the Joker's plan is a chaotic audition, a performance designed to forge a relationship in fire and blood. He studies you, tests you, pushes you to the brink not to kill you, but to understand you. This is the most unsettling villainy of all, the search for a kindred spirit in the abyss, the moment a monster looks at a hero and sees a reflection. At his side, Bane offers a different kind of threat. He is the logician, the strategist who unmasks your secrets and dismantles your support system piece by piece. While Joker wants to break your mind, Bane wants to break your foundation, proving that brute force is most terrifying when guided by a brilliant, ruthless intellect. He is the villain as a final exam, testing every skill you have ever learned. Then the shadow falls. In Arkham Knight, Scarecrow returns not as a man, but as a broadcast. He weaponizes the airwaves, turning the city into a psychological experiment where fear is the only truth. He doesn't need to hunt you, he simply turns every citizen into a vector for his terror, forcing you to watch as the city you protect devours itself from the inside out. His accomplice, the Arkham Knight, brings a different kind of pain. He is the ghost of your past, a living testament to your greatest failure. He knows your methods, exploits your weaknesses, and uses your own tactics against you. He is not just a soldier, he is a corrupted mirror, forcing you to fight the very person you created through your own tragic code. Their alliance is a masterclass in psychological warfare. One dismantles the myth of the hero while the other dismantles the man. Finally, you descend into the shadow play of Harvey Dent, not yet Two-Face but already a fractured man. As the Rat King, his villainy is a desperate plea for a justice the system could never provide. He is a tragic figure turned monster whose alternate personality wages war on a city that betrayed his ideals. He is not trying to burn the world, he is trying to expose its rot. And orchestrating this fall is a young Jonathan Crane, a puppet master pulling the strings of madness long before he dons the Scarecrow mask. He is the true Shadow, a villain who manufactures other villains, who sees human suffering not as a byproduct of his work, but as the work itself. His evil is the quietest and perhaps the most profound, for he is the one who plants the seeds of ruin in others. Each villain is a world unto themselves. A madhouse architect, a dying plague, a fractured idealist, a cold-blooded strategist, a phantom of failure, and a quiet doctor of despair. Each forces you to confront a different definition of evil, a new kind of night. The system does not simply reveal villains, it crafts them, demanding you choose which poison you are willing to endure to see the morning. But in a world that insists you must understand the monster to defeat it, how much of yourself do you lose looking into that abyss? As of 2007, the superhero video game was a punchline. A tired genre of licensed cash-ins and clumsy adaptations that promised power but delivered only repetition. But what happens when a game traps its hero in a single, cursed location for one night and makes the prison itself the main character? You are asked to decide what separates the keepers from the kept when the walls themselves are screaming. Released over a decade ago, Batman: Arkham Asylum was more than an action game. It was a gothic horror story masquerading as a power fantasy. It took the well-worn rhythm of a superhero brawler and submerged it in an atmosphere so thick you could feel it clinging to your cape. This is not just a game about a hero fighting his nemesis. It is a study of how an institution becomes a living monument to the madness it contains. Your world collapses to the claustrophobic confines of Arkham Island, a place divided into wings of medical torture and Victorian decay, where every intercom chime delivers a verdict. The official broadcasts from Warden Sharp promise order and rehabilitation, a clean institutional facade. But the Joker's hijacked whispers tell a darker truth, one that seeps from the very cracks in the floor. You follow the rules of this broken place because for tonight, survival requires complicity. Day one is a descent. Your arrival feels controlled, almost procedural, as you escort a restrained Joker into the belly of the beast. The halls are clean, the guards are confident, and the system appears to be working. Then, the trap springs. The lights die, the inmates break free, and the asylum unmasks itself. The cost of this first failure is your sense of safety, turning a routine transfer into a desperate siege. Your first encounters are with the lunatics, their movements frantic and unpredictable. This is not just a combat tutorial, it is a lesson in how quickly order can be weaponized into chaos. The asylum is not a hospital, it is a hunting ground, and you have just been marked as prey. A supportive insider arrives in the form of Commissioner Gordon, a voice of strained sanity in the growing madness. But he is quickly taken, forcing you to choose between a reckless rescue that risks the entire island and a calculated approach that risks one good man's life. His capture reveals a symbolic truth. On Arkham, even your oldest allies are just bait in a larger, more sinister game. The state agent appears next, embodied by the guards you are meant to protect. You see them picked off one by one, their confidence eroding with each passing hour. You try to save them, but their deaths serve as a constant, brutal reminder of your isolation. They are not reinforcements, they are the body count that measures your progress. Deeper inside, you begin the self-audit. You use your detective vision to see through walls, to track clues, to hunt your prey. The world becomes a schematic of skeletons and points of interest, a sanitized X-ray view that gives you an advantage. But you find yourself relying on it, keeping it active for minutes at a time, until you realize you haven't seen the asylum's true face at all. You are choosing to see the world as a machine of threats and targets, just like the institution itself does. You have become an agent of its cold, detached scrutiny. The paperwork arrives not on paper, but in the form of the Titan formula research left by Dr. Young. Her work presents a choice that feels cleaner than a killing blow, but it accomplishes the same catastrophic potential. You are no longer just fighting thugs, you are chasing a biological weapon, a spreadsheet of potential lives that could be twisted and destroyed. This is a new kind of violence, sanctioned by science and sanitized by procedure. For a moment, the asylum's true authority appears. Poison ivy's vines erupt across the island, tearing apart stone and steel, fighting back with a primal, supernatural fury. The building itself is under siege, and what you once feared as a prison now feels like a fragile sanctuary against a force of nature. Then the facade burns, and the crazed, Titan-enhanced monsters the Joker has manufactured walk the halls with impunity. The institution has not just failed, it has become a factory for the very horrors it was meant to contain. There are many ways this night can end. You can seal yourself inside the final arena, battling a monster of the asylum's own making, unsure if you have saved Gotham or only delayed its infection. If you failed to see the signs, to understand the island's rot, the night will come for you from inside your own mind. If you purge every threat with brutal efficiency, the silence that follows tastes the same as safety until it does not. If you cross too many lines, you become the very thing the asylum creates, a creature of violence trapped in a cycle of punishment. The asylum does not reveal monsters, it manufactures them by demanding you sort the world into predators and prey, the sane and the insane, the saviors and the damned. The game's true genius was making you feel the weight of its stones, the chill in its corridors, and the madness bleeding from its walls. In a world that insists you must become a hunter to survive the night, is survival worth the price of becoming another one of its ghosts? For over a decade, the Arkham series has defined what a superhero game can be. But what happens when the very place built to contain madness begins to breathe it? You are asked to decide who is the monster when the walls themselves are part of the disease. Your world collapses to a single haunted island, a place named Arkham. It is a world divided into cell blocks and treatment centers where every distorted chime over the intercom demands a verdict. The broadcasts from Warden Sharp deliver a story of order and control, while the whispers from the Joker hint at a much deeper, more chaotic truth. You distrust the clown, yet you are trapped inside his theater because survival requires you to play your part. Day 1 begins with a simple rule: contain the patient. This is a story of procedure, of steel gates and security checkpoints. Checking each corner costs you time and focus, turning your vigilance into a ritual performed for an audience of one. The asylum's own logic seems reasonable until you notice its true purpose. The restraining chairs, the observation cells, the inhuman cages, they do not exist to heal. They exist to punish. And then the supportive insider arrives, not as a hero, but as a voice in your ear. Commissioner Gordon is your anchor to the world you left behind, a reminder of the rules that no longer apply here. Following his guidance offers a path back to sanity, but ignoring it in favor of your own brutal efficiency promises a faster, darker victory. He represents a system you are sworn to protect, even as that system crumbles around you. The first phase is an illusion of control. You follow the trail, you neutralize the threats, you move through the intensive care unit like a ghost with a purpose. Each takedown feels like a small victory against the chaos, a quiet reassertion of order. The rules are not a safeguard, they are a story about who is in charge. For a moment, then the intruder appears not as a man but as an idea. The Scarecrow's fear toxin does not just break your mind, it weaponizes the asylum's own architecture against you. Hallways twist into impossible corridors, and the walls themselves scream with the ghosts of your failures. You are forced to choose between the visceral reality of the fight and the psychological horror of your own past, revealing that the greatest threat on this island is not the Joker, but the parts of him you carry inside yourself. This is the self-audit, the moment the system turns its lens inward. As the toxin courses through your veins, you finally see what the Joker sees, a man just as broken as the inmates he hunts, haunted by the same ghosts. You are the executioner and the suspect, the judge and the evidence. You are trapped by a madness that feeds on your fear. And then the state agent arrives, not with a badge, but with a legacy. The chronicles of Amadeus Arkham are scattered throughout the asylum, pieces of a sanitized history. Reading them feels like an investigation, a clean, procedural act. You are no longer just fighting thugs, you are an archivist, piecing together the island's original sin. you learn that the madness was never brought here by criminals, it was born here. The pages reveal that Warden Sharp sees himself as the reincarnation of Arkham, a man cleansing the world through institutional violence. This is not just paperwork. It is a story that codifies brutality into bureaucracy, turning murder into a moral crusade. The island's true nature begins to bleed through the cracks. For a moment, the arrival of guards and the lockdown of cell blocks suggest order might return, then the facade burns. Joker's broadcast seizes the asylum's voice, the Titan formula turns men into monsters, and Poison Ivy's vines tear the very foundations of the asylum apart. What you feared most now walks the halls with impunity, and so you descend into the deep, dark heart of it all. If you purge the island and defeat the Joker, you restore a fragile peace, but the silence tastes the same as failure. If you fail, if just one seed of that chaos remains, the night will come for you again, this time from inside the walls you fought to protect. If you cross too many lines to win, the world names you what you have become. There is no clean exit. The system does not reveal monsters, it manufactures them by demanding you sort the world into the sane and the insane, the saved and the damned. In a world that insists you must become a monster to defeat one, is victory worth the price of the reflection you no longer recognize? As of this night, the lunatics have taken over the asylum. But what happens when the asylum itself has a mind of its own and its sickness infects everyone inside? You are asked to decide who is the monster when the very walls whisper that it might be you. The entire game was built to offer a concise experience, a descent into a world that feels both otherworldly and deeply familiar. It parallels the decay of public institutions in ways designed to feel uncomfortably real. This is not just an action game, it is a study of how an environment becomes a weapon, how architecture codifies punishment. Your world collapses to Arkham Island, a place divided into wings of escalating madness where every distorted chime over the intercom demands a verdict. The official broadcasts from Warden Sharp deliver a story of order and control, while the Joker's hijacked transmissions whisper a more seductive, chaotic truth. You distrust the madness, yet you must navigate its rules because survival seems to require you to play the game. The first phase is containment. Your initial traversal through the intensive treatment wing is a ritual of control, filled with locked doors, falling elevators, and the bodies of guards who believed in the system. The cost is your certainty as you realize the institution's security was just a facade, a story told to keep the sane on one side of the glass and the mad on the other. This place is not a hospital, it is a monument to a failed idea. An ideologue arrives, or rather, he allows himself to be captured. The Joker, with a plan already in motion, forces you to choose between the risk of following his script and the risk of letting the island consume you whole. He reveals a symbolic truth. The real madness was never the inmates, but the belief that they could ever truly be contained. The second phase is infection. Poison Ivy, a supernatural force of nature, is unleashed and her vines begin to tear the island apart from the inside. They wrap around the stone gargoyles and burst through the sterile floors, turning your tactical advantages into overgrown traps. Scrutiny of the environment now costs you precious time as the very ground twists against you. The island is not just fighting back, it is telling a story about who truly belongs here. Then, the mystic arrives to test your mind. The Scarecrow's fear toxin doesn't just show you what you fear, it forces you into a psychedelic nightmare where the roles are reversed. You are no longer the predator stalking from the shadows. You are the prey. The cost is your own sanity, as you are forced to question if your war on crime is any different from the obsessions that brought these villains here. You finally descend into the island's underbelly to confront a beast, Killer Croc, in his sewer domain. He is an external intruder, a force of pure instinct, and you cannot fight him. You can only survive him. The encounter reveals that some monsters cannot be reasoned with or rehabilitated. They can only be evaded. Paperwork arrives in the form of Amadeus Arkham's chronicles, scattered spirit stones that tell a story of institutional decay. As you piece together his descent into the very madness he sought to cure, you uncover the Warden's own complicity, his belief that he is Arkham's reincarnated spirit. You are no longer just fighting criminals, you are performing an audit on a century of institutionalized cruelty, a verdict recorded in stone. You spend the entire night judging the sanity of others, sorting them into the guilty and the complicit. Then the final nightmare hits and you are asked to look inward. You are forced to confront the idea that Joker's blood is now in your veins, that the madness you fight has found a home inside you. You are executioner and suspect, judge and evidence, trapped by a system that feeds on your fear. For a moment, as the sun threatens to rise, you believe order can be restored. You have the cure, you have the culprit cornered, and the island's chaos seems to be reaching its conclusion. Then the facade burns away completely. The Joker injects himself with the Titan formula, becoming the very thing he sought to unleash upon the world, and the monster you feared most now stands before you. If you defeat him, you walk out into the dawn carrying not the body of a lover or a friend, but the architect of the night's horrors. You have purged the island, but the silence tastes the same as exhaustion. If you had failed, the infection would have spread beyond the walls, proving that the asylum was never a container. It was a cocoon. If you cross too many lines, the world may never know, but you will. The system does not simply house monsters, it is a machine that manufactures them by demanding you sort the world into predators and prey. In a place that insists you must embrace the darkness to survive, is survival worth the price of becoming the thing you hunt? As of 2007, the superhero game was a predictable formula of power without consequence. But what happens when the cage you lock your monsters in is a mirror, reflecting your own fractured mind? You are asked to descend into madness to restore order when the two have become indistinguishable. This is not just a story about Batman, it is a study of how architecture becomes psychology, how a prison's design weaponizes the very madness it claims to contain. Rocksteady's game presents a simple premise: you deliver the Joker to Arkham Asylum and he breaks free. Yet this setup parallels a darker, institutional logic, one that feels uncomfortably familiar. The procedures of this place are not safeguards, they are rituals designed to break you. Your world collapses to the claustrophobic confines of Arkham Island, a place where every rusted grate and flickering light is a monument to suffering. The Joker's voice crackles over the asylum intercom, a constant broadcast of chaos that feels like the institution's true authority. Meanwhile, the whispers of Amadeus Arkham's ghost, etched into the very stone, hint at a deeper, foundational sickness. You distrust the madness, yet you must navigate its rules because survival on this island demands a terrible kind of complicity. The first hour introduces the core ritual, the inspection. You learn to dissect the world through detective mode, a lens that reduces human beings to skeletons and heartbeats. This power costs nothing but your perception of reality, turning scrutiny into the only way you can navigate the darkness. The explanations for the asylum's brutalist design sound reasonable until you realize they were built to punish, not to heal. Every straitjacket and solitary cell is not a safeguard, it is a story about who deserves to be forgotten. Then, the nightmare arrives and the rules are inverted. The Scarecrow forces you to choose between facing your own trauma and succumbing to his manufactured horror, revealing that the greatest threat is not the inmates, but the memory of your own failure. He weaponizes your past, twisting your vow to protect into an instrument of self-destruction. This is not a fight, it is an audit of the soul. Day 2 escalates the logic of control. You find the Chronicles of Arkham, spiritual texts that turn the island's history into a scavenger hunt. The mechanical cost is your focus, pulling you away from the immediate threat to solve a historical riddle. This procedure sanitizes the island's violence, transforming it into a clean, intellectual puzzle. You are no longer just fighting for your life, you are archiving the very system that created this hell. For a moment, the arrival of surviving guards suggests order might return. Their protocols and professional calm offer a brief illusion of control against the encroaching chaos. Then the facade burns away as poison ivy's monstrous plants shatter the stone walls and reclaim the island for a primal, untamable nature. What you feared most is no longer contained. It now grows from the cracks in the foundation. You finally turn the system's tools inward, scanning not for clues but for a cure. You discover the Titan formula in your own blood, the same corruption you have been fighting all night. You are the executioner and the evidence, the judge and the judged, trapped in a system that feeds on your fear of becoming what you hunt. You can purge the island of the Titan infected, leaving a silence that tastes like victory until it doesn't. You can save the doctors, preserving the institutional knowledge that created this plague in the first place. You can defeat the Joker, proving your moral code is unbreakable, only to carry his body from the wreckage like a fallen brother, unsure if you have saved anyone or merely delayed the next cycle. If you embrace the shadows fully, you may escape the choice, but never the cost. The system does not reveal monsters, it manufactures them by demanding you sort the mad from the sane, the salvageable from the damned. It builds a labyrinth and asks you to become the beast that haunts it. In a world that insists you must descend into the abyss to save it, is survival worth the price of forgetting the man you were when you first stepped inside? It is the year 2007. A studio named Rocksteady presents a rhythm-based fighting game to a publisher who holds the rights to Batman, a character whose video game reputation is, at best, a punchline. But what happens when a simple pitch becomes a suffocating psychological maze? You are asked to decide where the madness truly lives, inside the asylum's walls or inside the one man trying to contain it. This is not just a look back at a classic game, it is a study of how atmosphere becomes a character and how a place of healing is weaponized into a cathedral of punishment. Arkham Asylum is not a game about stopping the Joker. It is a slow, methodical descent into a system where every corridor is a judgment and every shadow holds a verdict. Your world collapses to the confines of Arkham Island, a place severed from Gotham by a dark expanse of water. A televised broadcast from Warden Quincy Sharp delivers the official story, a narrative of control and rehabilitation that feels authoritative and clean. Meanwhile, the Joker's hijacked intercom system whispers the darker truth, a chaotic counter-broadcast that promises only violence. You distrust the clown prince of crime, yet you move through the asylum according to his rules, because survival inside this machinery seems to require your complicity. The first phase of the plan introduces a simple transaction. The Joker breaks free, a seemingly spontaneous event that costs you your sense of control. You follow his trail through the intensive treatment wing, a sterile facade that quickly peels back to reveal rot, decay, and a system already broken. The rules are not a safeguard, they are a story about who has been left to be forgotten. Then, the second phase weaponizes information. Your detective mode cuts through the darkness, turning the world into a clean, X-rayed schematic of threats and secrets. But using it costs you the world itself, turning your gaze into a constant, paranoid audit that misses the decay written on the walls. Explanations for the asylum's state sound reasonable until you realize this tool, meant for clarity, forces you to see every person as either a target or an obstacle. The state agent arrives in the form of guards and orderlies, men who believe in the institution's purpose, only to become its first victims. Their belief in protocol is the first thing the asylum devours, revealing that the system has no loyalty, not even to its enforcers. Then, the external intruder appears, not just the Joker, but the Titan formula he unleashes. It is a physical manifestation of the island's rage, turning men into monsters and revealing that the true infection was never madness, but the desperate search for power. Poison Ivy, the Mystic, offers an alternative exit from the asylum's cold steel logic. She twists the island into a supernatural garden, an organic rebellion against the sterile machinery of punishment. Her arrival forces you to choose between the island's man-made horrors and its monstrous, indifferent nature, revealing that there is no clean escape, only different kinds of contamination. And then comes the self-audit. You spend hours tracing the island's corruption, analyzing clues and following trails left by others. You finally look inward during Scarecrow's nightmare sequences and discover you are just as vulnerable, just as breakable, as the inmates you hunt. The system has turned the tables and you are now the rat in its maze, stalked by your own fear. The asylum's paperwork arrives in the form of patient interview tapes and the chronicles of Amadeus Arkham. With each collectible, you are given a choice that feels cleaner than a punch, yet accomplishes the same condemnation. Listening to these whispers, you become a collaborator in the asylum's history of pain, sorting lives into neat categories of tragedy and psychosis. You are no longer just fighting, you are diagnosing a sickness that has already consumed the foundations of the island. For a moment, as you restore power and re-establish a link with the outside world, the protocols and procedures suggest order has returned. You feel the cool confidence of the hunter, the predator back in control. Then the facade burns away. The Joker injects himself with Titan, and the Asylum's madness walks on two legs, holding the system's final, violent punchline in its fists. You can purge the madness, leaving the Joker a broken heap on the floor, and walk back into the coming dawn. But you carry his blood in your veins, unsure if you saved anyone or only delayed the inevitable infection. You can leave the island behind, but the silence that follows you back to Gotham tastes the same as complicity. The world may call you a hero, but you know what lines you crossed to earn that name. The system does not reveal monsters, it manufactures them by demanding you sort people into the saved and the damned. In a world that insists you must descend into the madness to defeat it, is survival worth the price of becoming the thing you fear most? As of this night, the Asylum holds the monsters. But what happens when the Asylum itself is the monster and its madness begins to look like a system? You are asked to decide where the sickness ends and the cure begins when both look so much alike. My name is Kai, and today we examine how the suffocating corridors of Arkham Asylum weaponize atmosphere, turning a single location into a study of institutional decay. This is not just a story about a superhero fighting a clown. It is a study of how an environment becomes a prison for the mind, built from equal parts concrete and fear. Your world collapses to one island, a place haunted by its own history long before the Joker arrived. Every flickering light and distant chime is a verdict. The official broadcasts from Warden Sharp promise order and rehabilitation, a clean facade over rusting steel, while the Joker's hijacked intercom whispers a darker truth about the island's soul. You distrust the madness, yet you are forced to navigate by its rules because survival seems to demand you play along. The first phase begins with a simple premise: the Joker is loose. Checking your surroundings costs you your focus, turning the simple act of observation into a kind of labor you perform on yourself. You move through intensive treatment, a space that claims to be a place of healing, but every straitjacket and bolted door tells a different story. The rules are not safeguards, they are instruments of control. Then the encounters begin. Harley Quinn arrives not just as a subordinate, but as an ideologue of chaos, forcing you to choose between direct confrontation and strategic avoidance. Her devotion reveals a chilling truth: the Asylum doesn't just contain madness, it cultivates it. You see it in the inmates, their bodies twisted by the Titan formula, a supposed cure that is just a more aggressive strain of the disease. The second phase introduces a new rule: you are being watched. The Joker's voice is everywhere, a constant broadcast that turns the entire island into a panopticon, a prison where the guards are laughing at you. This costs you your sense of safety, eroding the line between predator and prey. You take to the gargoyles using the shadows, but the feeling of being hunted never leaves. Then you meet Scarecrow. He arrives not as an intruder, but as a manifestation of the island's psychological torment. He forces you to choose between facing your own fear and succumbing to it, revealing a symbolic truth: the greatest threat in Arkham isn't the criminals, but the demons they unmask within you. His nightmare realm is the Asylum's logic taken to its extreme. You finally descend into the island's catacombs to hunt Killer Croc, a literal monster in the basement of a monstrous place. And in that dark water, you spend precious energy looking inward, realizing that the hunt has changed you. You have become as much a creature of this island as its inmates. You are the detective and the ghost, the cure and the symptom, trapped in a system that feeds on your own brand of controlled madness. The Chronicles of Arkham arrive, scattered pages that feel cleaner than a fistfight but accomplish a deeper violence. You piece together the story of Amadeus Arkham not through combat but through a quiet, forensic ritual. You are no longer just fighting, you are auditing the Asylum's original sin, becoming complicit in its history just by bearing witness to it. For a moment, the arrival of supplies from the Batwing suggests order can be restored. Technology and procedure promise a way out, then the facade burns. The Joker unleashes his Titan army, and the island's plant life, agitated by poison ivy, begins to tear the facility apart from its very foundations. What you feared most now walks the halls with impunity. If you purge every enemy, the silence tastes like safety until it does not. The island remains, its history unchanged, and you are left alone in a monument to failure. If you cross too many lines, you become the very thing the asylum was built to contain, another ghost haunting the corridors. You can escape the building, but you cannot escape what it represents. The system does not reveal monsters, it manufactures them by asking you to navigate an architecture of despair. It codifies madness into a set of rules and then punishes you for breaking them. In a world that insists you must descend into its darkness to restore the light, is survival worth the price of becoming another shadow on the wall?